The $300 million deal was seconds from collapse when the janitor stepped through the glass doors. Daniel Hayes had no business being there, still wearing his cleaning uniform, exhausted from another sleepless night with his kid. The 12 elite interpreters had already failed. CEO Lena Voss was about to walk away from the biggest negotiation of her career. But Daniel had heard something they all missed, buried in a dialect so rare most people didn't know it existed. He had one chance to speak, one chance before security threw him out, and everything he'd ever worked for was about to either save him or destroy him completely. If you want to see how far this story travels, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. Now let's begin. The fluorescent lights on the 47th floor of Titanis Group hummed with the kind of sterile precision that came from buildings designed to intimidate. Daniel Hayes pushed his cleaning cart past the executive conference room at 9:47 p.m., the wheels squeaking against polished marble that cost more per square foot than his entire month's rent. He wasn't supposed to stop. The night shift protocol was clear. Conference level between 9 and 10, executive suites after midnight when everyone had gone home. Stay invisible. Stay quiet. Collect the paycheck and get back to his kid before the babysitter's rate jumped at 11. But something made him pause. Through the frosted glass, he could see shapes moving. Too many people for this late. Voices filtered through, sharp, intense. Then a sound he recognized immediately. Rapid-fire Italian shifting mid-sentence into something else. Romanche, maybe. Or Ladin. Daniel's hand tightened on the cart handle. He should keep walking. He had exactly 43 minutes before he needed to catch the last downtown bus. His daughter Emma was home with Mrs. Chen from 4C, probably already asleep, but he liked to check on her, pull the blanket up over her shoulders, make sure her breathing was steady. 5 years old, and she still kicked off the covers every single night. The voices grew louder. Someone was shouting now in what sounded like Mandarin, but regional, Shanghainese dialect with a particular inflection he'd only heard in the manufacturing district near the port. Daniel glanced down the empty hallway. No one. Just him and the cart and the quiet hum of after-hours corporate America. He moved closer to the glass. Absolutely unacceptable. A woman's voice cut through the chaos, cold and precise. American, educated, used to being obeyed. We've been here for 6 hours and your team still hasn't clarified the subsidiary structure. Ms. Voss, if you just... I don't have time for just anything. The woman, Lena Voss, Daniel realized, the CEO, whose face was on the building directory downstairs, spoke with the kind of exhaustion that came from people wasting your time. Either provide documentation we can actually verify, or this meeting is over. Someone responded in Italian, fast, defensive. One of the interpreters translated, but Daniel could already hear the problem. They were missing every third word, smoothing over the gaps with corporate pleasantries. The Italian speaker had just said something about restructuring the agreement to accommodate regional specifications. But what he'd actually meant was, we're going to bury the liability transfers in the regional subsidiaries where your legal team won't find them for 6 months. Daniel knew because he'd heard that exact phrasing before. Different language, same trick. Port negotiators in Rotterdam use similar structures to hide container fees. The word sounded cooperative. The intent was anything but. He shouldn't care. This wasn't his world. These people made more in a day than he made in a year. They had interpreters, lawyers, entire teams dedicated to making sure deals went through clean. But the interpreter had just translated that section as willing to adjust terms for mutual benefit. That wasn't what was said. Daniel looked at his watch. 39 minutes until the bus. Inside the room, papers shuffled. Someone coughed. Then a new voice spoke up in German, formal, old-style Hochdeutsch with Swiss precision. Perhaps we should table this discussion until Monday. It's clear we're not reaching consensus tonight. The head interpreter translated smoothly. Suggest we reconvene Monday for clarity. Daniel's jaw tightened. That wasn't a suggestion. That was a strategic withdrawal. The Swiss speaker had just signaled to his team that they were pulling the deal completely, but in a way that made it sound like a polite postponement. By Monday, they'd have restructured the entire offer through a different entity, and Titanis would lose their negotiating position entirely. 37 minutes. The voices inside shifted again. Someone was speaking quickly in what sounded like Portuguese, but off somehow. Galician influence, maybe. Northern Spain. The rhythm was wrong for Brazilian Portuguese. None of the interpreters caught it. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had 7 years ago in Marseille when he'd watched a dock supervisor screw over a crew of day laborers by switching between French and Arabic mid-contract, knowing none of them could follow both. The same sick weight when he'd seen it happen in Singapore, in Mombasa, in every port city where people who needed work got played by people who knew they couldn't afford to ask questions. He'd learned languages the way most people learn to survive, by necessity, by sleeping in hostels where no one spoke English, by working jobs where you either picked up enough Mandarin to understand the foreman or you didn't eat, by spending 3 years drifting across Europe and Asia doing whatever work would take him before Emma was born, and he'd finally stopped running from nothing and started building toward something. Now he cleaned floors in buildings where people made decisions that moved markets, and he was about to walk away from a disaster because it wasn't his problem. 35 minutes. Inside, Lena Voss stood up. Daniel could see her silhouette through the frosted glass, tall, precise, done with this conversation. "We're finished here," she said. "My team will send the withdrawal documents in the morning." Several voices erupted at once. Italian, German, and something that might have been Romanian. The interpreters scrambled, talking over each other, but the damage was done. Daniel watched the meeting fall apart in real time. He should walk away. He should get on that bus. He should go home to his daughter and forget he ever heard any of this. His hand moved to the door handle instead. The metal was cold against his palm. Beyond it, he could hear the rustle of people gathering papers, chairs scraping back. In about 20 seconds, this room would empty and the deal would be dead. And then what? He'd go home. Emma would wake up tomorrow and ask if they could get pancakes at the diner on Sunday like they used to before money got tight. He'd tell her maybe next week, sweetheart, and she'd nod with that careful understanding that 5-year-olds shouldn't have to learn. Monday, he'd come back to this building and clean these same floors and pretend he never heard anything. Easy, safe, invisible. Daniel pushed the door open. The conversation stopped instantly. 12 faces turned toward him, executives in suits that cost more than his car, interpreters with tablets and earpieces, assistants clutching leather portfolios, and Lena Voss, standing at the head of the table with one hand on her briefcase and an expression that could cut glass. "Who the hell are you?" she said. Daniel's throat went dry. His cleaning uniform suddenly felt like it was made of neon. He could see security already moving toward him from the corner, 2 guys in blazers who'd been standing by the door. His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. "I heard what they said. The German speaker. About Monday." Lena's eyes narrowed. "We have interpreters." "I know." Daniel glanced at the head interpreter, a sharp-looking man in his 50s who was staring at him like he'd just crawled out of a sewer. "But they're missing it." The German speaker, older, silver-haired, expensive watch, leaned forward. He said something in rapid German that Daniel caught immediately. "Ist das ein Scherz? Wer ist dieser Mann?" "Is this a joke? Who is this man?" The interpreter translated blandly. "He asks who you are." Lena held up one hand, stopping security mid-approach. Her gaze fixed on Daniel with the intensity of someone used to reading people in seconds and deciding their value. "You speak German," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah. And you think you heard something my interpreters didn't?" Daniel knew how this sounded. He could see it in every face around the table. The janitor who thought he was smart. The cleaning guy who'd watched too many movies, but he'd already pushed the door open. "They didn't suggest postponing until Monday," Daniel said quietly. "They're pulling the deal completely. The way he phrased it, bis Montag vertagen. That's not a postponement. That's a full stop disguised as a delay. By Monday, they'll have restructured through a different entity, and Titanis loses all negotiating leverage." The room went silent. The German speaker's expression changed, just a flicker, but enough. One of his colleagues shifted in her seat. Lena's eyes hadn't left Daniel's face. "What else?" she said. The Italian speaker buried liability transfers in regional subsidiaries. The interpreter translated it as mutual benefit adjustments, but he actually said they were restructuring to hide compliance issues where your legal team wouldn't catch them for months. The head interpreter straightened. "That's not..." And the Galician speaker from the northern delegation just confirmed they're planning to move assets through a Portuguese shell structure before signing, Your team translated it as administrative preparation. Someone dropped a pen. The small sound echoed in the sudden stillness. Lena sat down slowly. How many languages are being spoken in this room right now? Daniel counted quickly. 8, 9 if you count the Romansh. And you understand all of them. Enough. The silver-haired German stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. He spoke in clipped, angry Hochdeutsch. Das ist absurd. Sie werden einem Hausmeister glauben. This is absurd. You're going to believe a janitor. I'm going to believe, Lena interrupted in perfect German, anyone who just prevented me from signing a contract with buried explosives. She switched back to English, her gaze sweeping the table. Everyone sit down. We're not done. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, reluctantly, the Varelli Consortium delegates settled back into their seats. Lena gestured to an empty chair. You. What's your name? Daniel Hayes. Sit down, Mr. Hayes, and walk me through every single thing that was said in the last 6 hours that my interpreters missed. Daniel glanced at his watch. 28 minutes until the bus. If he missed it, he'd have to call Mrs. Chen and ask her to stay later. That was $15 an hour after 10 p.m. Money he didn't have. But Lena Voss was looking at him like he'd just pulled her company back from a cliff edge. And somewhere in his chest, beneath the exhaustion and the fear and the constant weight of trying to keep Emma's world stable, something flickered that he hadn't felt in years. Like maybe the languages he'd learned running from nothing could actually build towards something. Daniel sat down. Okay, he said. Start with the opening remarks. Your interpreter said they wanted to establish mutual cooperation frameworks. What they actually said was... The next 2 hours moved like something out of a fever dream. Daniel spoke and the room transformed. Every buried clause, every hidden meaning, every polite phrase that masked contractual traps, he pulled them into the light one by one, while Lena's legal team scrambled to take notes, and the Varelli Consortium's delegates realized they were being systematically dismantled. The German speaker tried switching to Swiss German. Daniel followed. The Italian delegate shifted into Sicilian dialect. Daniel caught it. Someone attempted Catalan. Daniel rattled off a response that made 2 of the interpreters reach for their phones to verify what language he was even speaking. By midnight, the contract had been completely restructured. By 1 a.m., both sides had agreed to terms that actually meant what they said. By 2, Daniel was standing outside the conference room with his cleaning cart, staring at a business card Lena Voss had pressed into his hand. Monday morning, she'd said. 9 a.m. Don't be late. The card was heavy stock, embossed lettering, Director of International Relations, with a salary number penciled on the back that made Daniel's vision blur. He made it home at 2:47 a.m. Mrs. Chen was asleep on his couch. A Korean drama paused on her tablet. He paid her the overtime rate he couldn't afford, checked on Emma, blanket kicked off again, one arm flung over her stuffed rabbit, and finally sat down at his kitchen table. The business card lay in front of him next to a disconnection notice from the power company and a reminder that rent was due in 6 days. Monday morning felt like a hallucination. People like him didn't get offers like this. People who'd spent years broke and drifting didn't suddenly sit at tables with billionaires. There was always a catch. Always a moment where someone realized they'd made a mistake promoting the janitor. But that number on the back of the card... Daniel pulled out his phone and opened the calculator app. Salary divided by 12 months. Minus taxes, probably 30% divided by 4 weeks. Enough to cover rent. Enough to get Emma into the better daycare where they had art classes and didn't just park kids in front of tablets all day. Enough to stop choosing between electricity and groceries. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Lena Voss? The contract closed at 1:43 a.m. Clean signature, no buried issues. You just saved this company $93 million in liability exposure. See you Monday. Daniel stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then he got up, pulled Emma's blanket back over her shoulders, and sat by her bed until the sun came up. Sunday disappeared in a haze of panic. Daniel called his supervisor at the cleaning company and quit, professional, apologetic, burning a bridge he might need if this all fell apart. He borrowed money from Mrs. Chen for a suit from the discount store on 5th. He practiced what he'd say when he walked into Titanus Group through the front door instead of the service entrance. Emma asked why he was wearing fancy clothes. "New job, sweetheart," he told her, kneeling down to her level. "Might mean some changes." "Good changes?" "I hope so." She hugged him, her small arms fierce around his neck. "You look like a prince." Princes don't wear $30 suits from Marshalls. This one does. Monday morning, Daniel stood outside Titanus Group at 8:53 a.m. in his discount suit and tie. He'd watched 3 YouTube videos to learn how to knot properly. The security guard at the front desk, Jerome, who Daniel had chatted with during late-night cleaning shifts, did a double take. "Hayes? Man, what are you—" "Meeting with Ms. Voss," Daniel said, his voice steadier than he felt. "She's expecting me." Jerome checked his computer, eyebrows climbing. "Well, damn! Go on up, 47th floor." The elevator ride felt like drowning in reverse. Daniel watched the numbers climb, 10, 20, 30, and thought about everything that could go wrong. Maybe Lena had reconsidered. Maybe her board had overruled her. Maybe Friday night had been adrenaline and exhaustion, and by Monday morning she'd realized how insane it was to hire a janitor with no credentials and a resume that was mostly empty spaces. The doors opened on 47. A woman in her 20s with a tablet and an expression of professional efficiency looked up. "Mr. Hayes?" "That's me." "Right this way. Ms. Voss is finishing a call." She led him past the conference room, empty now, cleaned and perfect, and down a hallway to an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Lena Voss stood with her back to the door, phone pressed to her ear, talking rapidly about market positions and fiscal projections. She gestured for Daniel to sit without turning around. He sat. The office was impressive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. Clean lines, expensive furniture that looked comfortable instead of showy, bookshelves filled with actual books instead of decorator spines. A photo on the desk showed Lena shaking hands with someone Daniel vaguely recognized from news coverage. She ended the call and turned around. "You came," she said. "You told me to." People don't always do what I tell them." Lena sat down across from him, her gaze sharp and assessing, especially when it sounds too good to be true. "Is it?" Daniel asked. "Too good to be true?" "Probably." She pulled a folder from her desk. "I had my team run a background check. Hope you don't mind." Daniel's stomach tightened. "What did you find?" "Not much." Lena opened the folder. Graduated high school in Chicago. Disappeared for about 6 years. Traveled extensively based on passport records, but no employment history we could verify. Reappeared 3 years ago in New York. Applied for custodial work at Titanus. Single father to 1 daughter, Emma Hayes, age 5. Current residence in subsidized housing. No criminal record. No credit to speak of. She looked up. And apparently fluent in at least 9 languages that you learned. How, exactly? Daniel had known this question was coming. I worked. Different countries, different jobs. You pick things up. Most people pick up enough to order food and ask for directions. You picked up commercial negotiation fluency in languages most Americans don't know exist. I'm good at listening. Clearly. Lena closed the folder. Here's my problem, Mr. Hayes. I have a board meeting in 3 hours where I need to explain why I want to create a new director-level position for someone with no verifiable credentials, no college degree, and no corporate experience. What do I tell them? Daniel met her gaze. Tell them you spent 6 hours on Friday with 12 professional interpreters and they missed everything that mattered. Tell them the Varelli contract would have destroyed this company if someone hadn't been paying attention. Tell them languages aren't just about words. They're about context and culture and the 1,000 ways people hide meaning in plain sight. And tell them, he paused, tell them you need someone who learned languages by needing them, not from textbooks, from survival. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, quick and sharp. I'm going to get pushback. I know. Executive team is going to hate this. HR is going to have a meltdown. And if you screw up even once, they'll use it as evidence that I made a terrible decision. I won't screw up. Everyone screws up, Mr. Hayes. The question is whether you can recover. Daniel thought about Emma asking if they could get pancakes, about the power company notice, about 7 years of drifting and 3 years of cleaning floors, and every single moment that had led to sitting in this chair. I can recover, he said. Lena stood up and extended her hand. Welcome to Titanus Group. You start tomorrow, 8 a.m. Don't be late. Daniel shook her hand, his grip firm despite the tremor he could feel starting in his fingers. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. Lena walked him to the door. This is the easy part. Now comes everything else. What? The board meeting happened without him. Daniel spent the day filling out paperwork in HR while a stone-faced woman named Patricia processed his employment with the enthusiasm of someone handling contaminated materials. Drug test is mandatory, she said, not looking up from her computer. Background check is already complete. You'll need to provide documentation for your daughter's healthcare enrollment, emergency contact information, direct deposit details. Daniel provided everything, signed everything, agreed to everything. By 6 p.m., he was officially an employee of Titanus Group with a salary that made his hands shake when he saw it in writing. He picked Emma up from daycare, the cheap one that smelled like industrial cleaner and had one tired teacher for 15 kids, and took her to the diner. Pancakes? She asked, eyes wide. Pancakes, Daniel confirmed. They sat in their usual booth and Emma told him about her day, a story about blocks and someone named Tyler who kept knocking down her tower, while Daniel watched her and felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for as long as he could remember. When the food came, Emma drowned her pancakes in syrup and looked up at him with chocolate chips on her face. Dad? Yeah, sweetheart? Are we going to be okay now? Daniel reached across the table and took her small hand in his. Yeah, he said. I think we are. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his old notebook, the one he'd carried through Marseille and Singapore and Mombasa and every other place that had taught him something new. The pages were worn, filled with notes in a dozen languages, phrases he'd needed, words that mattered. He turned to a fresh page and wrote Day 1. Then he closed the notebook and allowed himself just for a moment to believe that maybe invisible people could become something else. That maybe languages learned from necessity could build toward a future his daughter would never have to survive. That maybe, just maybe, everything he'd risked on Friday night had been the beginning of something instead of the end. Tomorrow, he would find out. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. But tonight, in his small apartment with his daughter breathing steady in the next room, Daniel Hayes let himself hope. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of cold that made Daniel's breath fog in the pre-dawn darkness. He stood outside Titanus Group at 7:42 a.m., 18 minutes early, watching people in expensive coats stream through the rotating doors like they belonged there. He didn't move. The suit he'd bought felt stiff across his shoulders. The tie was already choking him. His employee badge, laminated and official with his photo looking vaguely stunned, hung around his neck on a lanyard that felt like a noose. A woman in her 40s rushed past him, talking rapidly into her phone about quarterly projections. She didn't glance his way. Why would she? He looked like every other corporate drone heading into another day of meetings and emails and whatever else people did in buildings like this, except he wasn't. Daniel checked his watch. 16 minutes. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Emma ate breakfast. Very excited you have fancy job. She made you good luck drawing. I take photo. The image loaded. Crayon scribbles that might have been him in a suit or possibly a giraffe. Hard to tell. Emma had written Dad in wobbly letters across the top. Daniel saved the photo and put his phone away. Then he walked through the doors. The lobby was already busy. Jerome was at the security desk, but a different guard was checking badges at the turnstiles. Daniel approached, held up his badge, and tried not to look like he was waiting to be exposed as a fraud. The turnstile clicked green. He was through. The elevator was packed. Daniel wedged himself into a corner and watched the numbers climb. 20, 30, 40, while snippets of conversation washed over him. Someone complaining about a delayed shipment, 2 women discussing a presentation, a man on his phone talking about his kid's soccer tournament, normal people doing normal work. Daniel wondered how long it would take before someone realized he didn't belong here. The 47th floor was already humming with activity when he stepped off. The assistant from yesterday, her name was Rachel, he remembered, looked up from her desk. Mr. Hayes, right on time. She stood, all professional efficiency. Ms. Voss is in meetings until 9:30, but she wanted me to get you settled. Follow me. Rachel led him down a hallway past offices with closed doors and conference rooms with people already deep in discussion. She stopped at a door near the end. This is yours, she said, pushing it open. Daniel stepped inside and stopped. It was an office, an actual office with a desk and a chair and windows that looked out over the city. Not huge, maybe 12 by 15, but private. Real. His entire apartment could fit in here twice. Ms. Voss had IT set up your computer, Rachel continued, pointing to the sleek monitor on the desk. Login credentials are in this envelope. You'll need to change your password on first access. Your email is already active, daniel.hayes@titanusgroup.com. Phone extension is 4782. Building access works 24/7 with your badge. She paused, checking her tablet. Oh, and you have orientation at 11 with HR. Patricia will walk you through policies and compliance training. Daniel just nodded, still staring at the office. Any questions? Rachel asked. About 1,000. I'm good. Great. Ms. Voss will call for you when she's ready. Coffee station is down the hall on the left. Bathroom is... I know where the bathroom is, Daniel said, then caught himself. I mean, Right, you used to work night shift. Rachel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Not quite judgment, more like curiosity. Well, welcome to Days. It's different up here. She left, closing the door behind her. Daniel stood in the middle of his office, and felt the weight of it settle over him like a physical thing. The desk was real wood, not particle board. The chair was leather. There was a bookshelf along one wall, empty now but waiting. He walked to the window and looked down at the street 47 floors below. Tiny people moving in patterns, everyone heading somewhere with purpose. Last week, he'd been one of them. Invisible. Forgettable. Now he was up here. Daniel pulled out his phone and took a picture of the view. Then he sent it to Mrs. Chen with a message. Tell Emma her dad has an office with windows. The response came back quickly. She says you are the boss now. I tell her maybe not boss, but important. She says same thing. Daniel smiled despite the knot in his stomach. Then he sat down at his desk, logged into the computer with credentials that had his actual name on them, and stared at an inbox that was already filling with messages. Welcome to Titanus Group. New hire orientation schedule, building security protocols, and one from Lena Voss with the subject line, read this first. Daniel clicked it open. Hayes, you're going to get pushback. Expect it. Some of it will be professional skepticism, which is reasonable. Some will be people protecting territory. Some will be assholes being assholes because that's what they do. Ignore all of it. Your job is simple. I need someone who can sit in rooms where billion-dollar decisions get made and catch what everyone else misses. I need someone who understands that language isn't just communication. It's strategy, misdirection, cultural context, and about 50 other things most interpreters don't bother learning. Don't try to be diplomatic. Don't try to fit in. Do the work. We'll meet at 9:30 to discuss your first assignment. LV. Daniel read it twice, then sat back in his leather chair and exhaled slowly. Do the work. He could do that. At 9:28, his phone rang. The desk phone, not his cell. He stared at it for 2 rings before picking up. Hayes? Conference room 3, Rachel's voice said. Ms. Voss is ready. Daniel grabbed a notebook, one of 3 that had been waiting on his desk in a supply basket, and headed down the hall. Conference room 3 was smaller than the one from Friday night. Lena sat at the head of the table with her laptop open and a coffee that looked like it had gone cold hours ago. 2 other people were already seated, a man in his 50s with gray hair and an expensive suit, and a woman around 40 with sharp eyes and a tablet covered in handwritten notes. Hayes, Lena said without preamble. This is Robert Chen, VP of International Contracts, and Sarah Mills, Head of Legal Review. They were both in the room Friday night. Robert nodded politely. Sarah's expression was carefully neutral in a way that told Daniel exactly what she thought of this situation. Sit, Lena said. Daniel sat. Lena closed her laptop and looked at him directly. The Varelli contract closed clean. No surprises, no hidden issues. Everything you flagged got restructured properly. Robert's team spent the weekend reviewing every clause against your translations. She glanced at Robert. Tell him. Robert cleared his throat. You were right. All of it. The subsidiary structure, the liability transfers, the German postponement strategy. Our interpreters missed critical context in at least 17 separate exchanges. He paused. How long have you been studying commercial contract language? I haven't, Daniel said. I just listen to what people actually mean instead of what they want you to think they mean. Sarah leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, I need to understand your background. Where did you train? What's your certification level for legal interpretation? I don't have one. You don't have certification? I don't have training. I picked up languages working. Different countries, different jobs. Sarah's expression tightened. Ms. Voss, we cannot have uncertified personnel providing translation services in legally binding negotiations. The liability exposure alone is less than the $93 million we would have lost if Hayes hadn't caught what your certified interpreters missed, Lena cut in. We're not replacing anyone, we're adding capability. By hiring someone with no credentials, by hiring someone who prevented a disaster. Lena's voice went cold. Are we really having this conversation? Sarah sat back, her jaw tight. I'm documenting my objection. Document whatever you want. Lena turned back to Daniel. Here's the situation. We have a deal closing Thursday with the Christensen Group out of Copenhagen. Renewable energy contracts, EU compliance requirements, about $40 million in projected revenue. The negotiations have been going on for 3 months, and they've been clean so far. Almost too clean. You think they're hiding something, Daniel said. I think everyone hides something. Lena pulled up a document on her laptop and turned the screen toward him. This is the current contract draft. It's in English, but Christensen's negotiating team includes representatives from Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. We've had our usual interpretation team handling everything. Read through this and tell me if anything feels wrong. Daniel pulled the laptop closer. The document was dense. 47 pages of legal language, technical specifications, compliance requirements. He started reading, his eyes scanning not just for words but for rhythm, for the places where language shifted in ways that felt deliberate. The room was quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system. Robert checked his watch. Sarah made notes on her tablet. Lena drank her cold coffee and waited. Daniel reached page 23 and stopped. Here, he said, tapping the screen. Section 14, subsection C, the compliance timeline. Lena leaned over. What about it? It's phrased in English, but the structure is wrong. This reads like it was written in Danish first, then translated badly. See how the dependent clauses stack? That's not how English legal documents flow. Someone translated this directly without adapting the syntax. Sarah frowned. Our legal team reviewed that section. It's standard compliance language. It's standard Danish compliance language, Daniel said. In Denmark, you can defer compliance reporting by filing preliminary documentation with provisional timelines. In the US, that's not how it works. This section looks like it gives you standard reporting requirements. But if it was structured this way in the original Danish version, they're building in a 6-month delay before they have to provide any actual compliance data. Robert pulled out his phone and started typing. That would put their reporting deadline after our fiscal year closes. We wouldn't know if they were compliant until after we'd already booked the revenue. Which means if they're not compliant, we'd have to retroactively adjust, Sarah said slowly. She looked at Daniel with new attention. How did you catch that? I worked in Copenhagen for 8 months, Daniel said. Construction job. The foreman used to bury timeline extensions and contract amendments using the same clause structure. It's a common trick if you know what you're looking for. Lena closed the laptop. Robert, get this to the legal team. I want that section completely rewritten before Thursday. Sarah, pull the original Danish drafts if we have them. I want to know what else might have gotten mistranslated. We don't usually keep working drafts in source languages, Sarah said. We do now. Lena stood up. Hayes, you're sitting in on the Christensen meeting Thursday. I want you listening to everything that gets said in any language other than English. If something feels wrong, you flag it immediately. Daniel nodded. Okay. And Hayes? Lena paused at the door. Good work. After she left, Robert gathered his papers. Sarah stayed seated, studying Daniel with the expression of someone trying to solve a problem. You really learned all this just from working random jobs? She asked. More or less. She trailed off, then shook her head. I have 3 degrees and 12 years in corporate law. I didn't catch what you just caught. You weren't looking for it, Daniel said. Different skill set. Clearly, Sarah stood up. For what it's worth, my objection isn't personal. I just need to make sure we're protected legally. If you're going to be providing interpretation services, We need to document your capabilities properly. I understand. Do you? She looked at him directly. Because this company operates in extremely high-stakes environments. One mistake in a negotiation can cost millions, sometimes hundreds of millions. The reason we use certified interpreters is because they have accountability structures. If you make an error, then I make an error, Daniel said. But I won't. Sarah's expression was unreadable. Everyone makes errors, Mr. Hayes. Then I'll own it when I do. She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded slightly. I'll have my team prepare documentation protocols for your translations. We'll need written records of any interpretation you provide in official negotiations. Fine. After she left, Daniel sat alone in the conference room and felt the reality of it settle over him. These people were trusting him with deals worth more money than he could properly conceptualize. One mistake, and he wouldn't just lose this job, he'd potentially cost the company millions. The weight of it should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like something clicking into place. He spent the rest of the morning in orientation with Patricia from HR, who walked him through sexual harassment policies, confidentiality agreements, expense reporting procedures, and about 40 other things delivered in the tone of someone reading a script they'd memorized years ago. Any questions? Patricia asked finally, her expression suggesting there better not be. When do I get paid? Daniel asked. Bi-weekly, direct deposit? First paycheck hits 2 weeks from Friday. 18 days. Daniel did the math automatically. Rent was due in 4 days, and he had about $200 in his account after paying Mrs. Chen for the extra hours last week. Is there any way to get an advance? He asked. I've got some bills. Company policy doesn't allow advances for new hires. Patricia's voice was flat. You should have considered that before quitting your previous employment. Daniel felt heat creep up his neck. Right, thanks. Back in his office, he pulled out his phone and stared at his bank balance. $237. Rent was $1,100. He could ask Mrs. Chen to wait on the childcare payment. She'd probably say yes because she was kind, but that felt like taking advantage. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Robert Chen. Lena mentioned you might need some flexibility on your first paycheck. Stop by my office when you have a minute. Daniel stared at the message, something uncomfortable twisting in his chest. He didn't want charity. Didn't want to be the guy who couldn't make it 2 weeks without help. But Emma needed to eat. He found Robert's office on the 46th floor. The door was open and Robert waved him in, barely looking up from his computer. Close the door, Robert said. Daniel did. Robert pulled out a checkbook, an actual physical checkbook that looked like it belonged to someone's grandfather, and started writing. This is a personal loan, not company business. $2,000, zero interest, pay me back whenever. If anyone asks, you're doing some freelance translation work for me on the side. He tore off the check and held it out. Daniel didn't take it. I can't. You can and you will, because I've been where you are. Robert's voice was matter-of-fact. 30 years ago, I was working overnight at a printing plant trying to feed 2 kids. Someone gave me a break when I needed it. Now I'm passing it forward. Take the check, deposit it, pay your rent, and don't make this more complicated than it is. Daniel took the check with hands that weren't quite steady. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just do the work. Robert went back to his computer. And Hayes? The reason Lena hired you isn't charity. She hired you because you're good at something she needs. Don't waste time wondering if you belong here. You do. Daniel left before his voice could crack. That afternoon, he sat in his office reviewing files for the Christensen meeting, while outside his window the sun tracked across the sky. People stopped by to introduce themselves, some curious, some polite, some with the carefully neutral expressions of people who'd heard about the janitor who got promoted and weren't sure what to make of it. Around 3 p.m., his door opened without a knock. A man in his early 30s leaned against the doorframe, expensive suit, gelled hair, expression like he smelled something rotten. So, you're the miracle worker, he said. Daniel looked up. Can I help you? Marcus Webb, Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships. He said it like the title should mean something. I hear you're sitting in on the Christensen deal. That's right. Marcus walked into the office uninvited and sat in the chair across from Daniel's desk. Let me give you some friendly advice. Christensen has been my account for 8 months. I've built relationships with their executive team. I've structured the terms. I've done the groundwork. The last thing I need is someone coming in at the 11th hour trying to prove themselves by finding problems that don't exist. Daniel set down his pen. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm doing what Lena asked me to do. Lena. Marcus smiled without warmth. You two on a first-name basis already? That was fast. Ms. Voss, Daniel corrected. And yeah, we are, because she hired me to do a job. Right. The job. Marcus leaned back, crossing his legs. You know what I think? I think you got lucky on the Viarelli deal. Right place, right time, heard something that sounded important. But luck runs out. And when it does, people remember that you were a janitor 3 days ago. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. I still know how to clean floors if that's what you're asking. I'm asking if you understand how things work at this level. Because up here, it's not just about being right. It's about relationships, credibility, years of experience. You can't just walk in off the street and expect people to trust you with deals worth tens of millions. Good thing I'm not asking for trust, Daniel said. I'm just doing the work. Marcus stood up. Thursday's meeting is critical. Christensen is ready to sign. Don't screw this up by trying to be a hero. He left without waiting for a response. Daniel sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway. Then he went back to reviewing the contract files, ignoring the way his hands wanted to shake. That evening, he picked Emma up from daycare, the same cheap one because he hadn't had time to research better options yet, and took her home. She chattered about her day while he made dinner from the groceries he'd bought with the last of his money before depositing Robert's check. Tyler knocked down my blocks again, Emma said, pushing pasta around her plate. I told him to stop, but he didn't listen. What did you do? Daniel asked. I built it again, higher. Daniel smiled. That's my girl. After Emma went to bed, he sat at his kitchen table with his old notebook and reviewed everything he'd learned about the Christensen Group. The company profile, the executive bios, the deal structure. He pulled up news articles in Danish, German, and Dutch, reading through local coverage that the English language analysts had probably missed. At midnight, he found it. A small article in a Danish trade publication from 6 weeks ago. Christensen Group was being investigated by EU regulators for compliance violations in a different renewable energy contract. Nothing definitive yet, just preliminary inquiries. But the language used, procedural review of documentation timelines, matched exactly the kind of phrasing buried in Section 14 of the Titanis contract. They were building in the same delay structure they'd used before. Daniel grabbed his phone and texted Lena, then stopped. It was midnight. She probably wasn't awake, and this could wait until morning. His phone rang 30 seconds later. Talk, Lena's voice said. Daniel explained what he'd found. The article, the language patterns, the connection. Lena was quiet for a moment. Send me the link. I'll have legal review it tonight. Sorry for texting so late. Hayes, if you find something that matters, I don't care what time it is. Send it. She hung up. Daniel sent the article link, then sat in his dark kitchen feeling like he'd just stepped off another cliff. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold. Daniel got to the office at 7:30 to find an email from Sarah Mills waiting. Review meeting 8 a.m., conference room 3. Bring everything you have on Christensen compliance issues. The meeting included Lena, Sarah, Robert, and 2 other lawyers Daniel didn't recognize. He walked them through what he'd found, the Danish article, the language patterns, the structural similarities. One of the lawyers pulled up the EU regulatory database and started cross-referencing. He's right. Christensen has 3 open compliance investigations, 2 in Denmark, 1 in Germany, all related to documentation timeline deferrals. Which means Section 14 isn't an accident, Sarah said. They're deliberately building in the same structure that's already under regulatory scrutiny. Lena's expression was cold. What happens if we sign this contract with that section intact? We'd be liable for any compliance failures on their end, Robert said. If EU regulators find violations, we'd face penalties as the partnering entity. How much? Depends on the severity. Could be anywhere from 5 million to 50 million in fines. Lena looked at Daniel. Good catch. What do we do? Sarah asked. The meeting is tomorrow, and they're expecting to close. We tell them Section 14 needs to be restructured, Lena said. Complete transparency on compliance timelines, no deferrals, real-time reporting requirements. They'll push back, Robert said. This might kill the deal. Then it kills the deal. Lena stood up. I'm not signing a contract with buried explosives. If Christensen wants to do business with us, they do it clean. She left. The lawyer started gathering papers. Daniel sat there feeling like he'd just killed a $40 million deal and wasn't sure if that was good or catastrophic. Sarah paused by the door. Hayes? A word? They walked to her office. She closed the door and turned to face him. I owe you an apology, she said. I was wrong about the certification concerns. What you found, our entire legal team missed it. If we'd signed that contract, she trailed off, we would have been exposed to massive liability. I just got lucky with the article, Daniel said. No. You knew what to look for because you understand how people hide things in language. That's not luck. Sarah pulled out a file. I'm setting up a documentation protocol for your work. Anytime you provide interpretation or analysis in a negotiation, we'll create an official record. It protects you, and it protects the company. Okay. And Hayes, Marcus Webb came to see me yesterday. Complained that you were overstepping on his account. She smiled slightly. I told him that saving the company from a $50 million regulatory violation isn't overstepping. It's doing your job. After she left, Daniel went back to his office and tried to focus on preparing for tomorrow's meeting. But his mind kept circling back to the same thought. He'd just potentially killed a major deal. $40 million in revenue gone because he found a problem no one else had seen. What if he was wrong? His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Hope you're proud of yourself. Months of work down the drain because you had to play detective. Daniel deleted it without responding. Thursday morning came too fast. Daniel stood in his apartment at 6 a.m., adjusting his tie for the 5th time while Emma watched cartoons and ate cereal. You look nervous, she said. I'm fine. You did the tie 3 times already. Daniel smiled despite himself. Since when did you get so observant? I'm always observant. Emma went back to her cereal. Mrs. Chen says you're doing important work. Mrs. Chen talks too much. She says you're brave. Daniel knelt down next to Emma's chair. I'm not brave, sweetheart. I'm just trying to do a good job. That's the same thing, Emma said seriously. Trying is brave. Daniel hugged her, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood. I love you, kid. Love you too, Dad. Go be important. The Christensen meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Daniel arrived at 9:15 to find conference room 1 already being set up. Rachel was coordinating with catering, coffee, pastries, water service. Miss Voss wants you in early, she said. She's already inside. Daniel found Lena standing at the head of the conference table, reviewing notes. She looked up when he entered. You ready? She asked. I think so. Don't think. No. Lena closed her folder. Christensen's team will push back hard on the compliance section. They'll try to frame it as standard industry practice, unnecessary bureaucracy, whatever makes us look unreasonable. Your job is to listen to what they say in Danish and German when they think we don't understand. If they're coordinating strategy mid-meeting, I need to know. Got it. And Hayes? Lena's expression softened slightly. You did good work finding that regulatory issue. Don't second-guess yourself now. At 9:58, the Christensen group arrived. There were 5 of them, 2 executives from Copenhagen, 1 lawyer from their Amsterdam office, and 2 technical specialists. They shook hands with Lena, with Robert, with Sarah. When they got to Daniel, the lead executive, a man named Lars Christensen, mid-50s, expensive glasses, paused. I don't believe we've met, he said in perfect English, with just a hint of Danish accent. Daniel Hayes, Daniel said. International Relations. Lars's handshake was firm and assessing. Pleasure. They sat. Lena started with pleasantries. Thanks for traveling, excited about the partnership, looking forward to finalizing terms. Standard opening moves. Then she got to business. We've reviewed the contract thoroughly, Lena said. There are some concerns with Section 14 that we need to address before moving forward. Lars's expression didn't change. What kind of concerns? Sarah pulled up the relevant section on the screen. The compliance timeline structure appears to allow for significant reporting delays. We need real-time transparency, not deferred documentation. One of the Danish executives, younger, sharp suit, leaned over and said something quietly to Lars in Danish. Daniel caught it clearly. This is the American lawyer I warned you about. She'll want complete control. Lars nodded slightly, then responded in English. I'm not sure I understand the concern. This is standard industry practice throughout the EU. It may be standard, Lena said, but it's not acceptable for this partnership. We need compliance reporting within 30 days, not 6 months. The Amsterdam lawyer jumped in. Ms. Voss, with respect, the timeline in Section 14 accounts for the complexity of EU regulatory requirements. We can't simply accelerate documentation that requires multi-level approval. The younger Danish executive muttered something else in Danish. If they won't accept standard terms, we walk. The Frankfurt Group will take this deal in a heartbeat. Daniel kept his expression neutral, but he locked eyes with Lena for just a second. She caught it. Perhaps we should take a short break, Lars suggested smoothly. Give both teams a chance to discuss internally? That won't be necessary, Lena said. Mr. Hayes, did you have something to add? Every eye in the room turned to Daniel. This was it, the moment where he either proved Marcus wrong or confirmed every doubt Sarah had raised. Daniel looked at Lars directly. The Frankfurt Group won't take this deal because they already know about your compliance investigations in Denmark and Germany. 3 open cases, all involving the same documentation timeline deferrals you're trying to build into this contract. The room went dead silent. Lars's expression froze. The younger executive went pale. I'm sorry? Lars said carefully. You're under investigation by EU regulators, Daniel continued. Procedural reviews for documentation timeline violations. The language in Section 14 mirrors exactly the structure that's already flagged for regulatory compliance issues. If Titanis signs this contract as written, we become liable for your violations. The Amsterdam lawyer started to object. Lars held up one hand, stopping her. How did you? He switched to Danish, speaking directly to his colleague. Hvordan ved de det? How do they know? Fordi jeg læste deres lokale pressemeddelelser, Daniel replied in Danish. Og jeg forstår hvad du siger lige nu. Because I read your local press releases, and I understand what you're saying right now. The younger executive's face went white. Lars stared at Daniel for a long moment, then switched back to English. I see. He turned to Lena. It appears we have some restructuring to discuss. Appears so, Lena said neutrally. The meeting ran for another 90 minutes. The compliance section got completely rewritten with real-time reporting requirements and regulatory transparency clauses. The revenue projections dropped by about 15% because Christensen couldn't hide costs the way they'd planned, but the deal stayed alive. When the Christensen team finally left, polite handshakes, professional farewells, Lena waited until the elevator doors closed before turning to Daniel. You just renegotiated a $40 million deal in real time, she said. I just told you what they were saying. You told me in the exact right moment with the exact right information. Lena smiled, genuine, not the corporate version. That's not luck, Hayes, that's skill. Robert clapped Daniel on the shoulder. I think you just earned your paycheck. Sarah was already typing on her tablet. I'm documenting everything. This needs to be on record. Back in his office, Daniel sat down and felt the adrenaline drain out of him all at once. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing. He'd just gone head-to-head with European executives in a multi-million-dollar negotiation and somehow hadn't completely screwed it up. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Lars Christensen. I wanted to reach out personally. What you did today was impressive. We don't often encounter that level of linguistic capability in American business. If you're ever interested in opportunities in Europe, I'd like to discuss it. Daniel stared at the message. Then he deleted it and went back to work. That evening, he picked up Emma and took her to the good diner, the one with the real maple syrup and the waitress who knew their order. Did you have a good day? Emma asked, drowning her pancakes in syrup. Yeah, Daniel said. I think I did. Were you brave? He thought about stepping into that conference room, about calling out the Danish executive in his own language, about the moment when he could have stayed quiet and didn't. Maybe a little, he admitted. Emma beamed at him. I knew it. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his notebook. He turned to a fresh page and wrote, Day 4, Christensen meeting, deal restructured, still employed. Then he paused and added, Marcus was wrong. Robert was right. I belong here. He closed the notebook and allowed himself to believe it might be true. The suspension notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after Daniel had started believing his life might actually stabilize. He was in his office reviewing contracts for a manufacturing deal when Rachel appeared in his doorway, her usual professional composure cracked around the edges. "Mr. Hayes, you need to come with me." Daniel looked up from his screen. "What's wrong?" "Just come, please, Long." The walk to HR felt like moving through water. Rachel wouldn't meet his eyes. People in the hallway glanced away when he passed. By the time they reached Patricia's office, Daniel's stomach had turned to lead. Patricia sat behind her desk with the expression of someone about to deliver news she'd been waiting to deliver. Beside her sat a man Daniel didn't recognize, late 50s, suit that screamed lawyer, briefcase on the floor. "Mr. Hayes, this is Gregory Nash from our Legal Compliance Division," Patricia said. "Please sit down." Daniel sat. Gregory opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Mr. Hayes, we've received a formal complaint regarding your conduct during the Christensen Group negotiation. Specifically, concerns have been raised about unauthorized participation in executive-level discussions, overstepping your role as a junior member of the International Relations team, and providing interpretation services without proper certification or oversight." The words hit like physical blows. "Who filed the complaint?" "That's confidential." Gregory's tone was flat, rehearsed. "However, the complaint alleges that your actions during the negotiation created liability exposure for Titanus Group and violated established protocol for contract discussions." "I did what Ms. Voss asked me to do." "Ms. Voss's directives don't supersede company policy," Patricia said. "You were hired as a director-level employee, but that doesn't authorize you to independently interpret in high-stakes negotiations without legal supervision." Daniel felt heat rising in his chest. "I prevented Titanus from signing a contract that would have exposed us to $50 million in regulatory fines." "That's your interpretation," Gregory said. "Others view it differently. The complaint suggests you manufactured a crisis to justify your position and undermine months of relationship building with a major client." Marcus. It had to be Marcus. "This is bullshit," Daniel said. Patricia's expression hardened. "Mr. Hayes, your language—" "No." Daniel stood up. "You want to talk about protocol? Fine. Pull the recordings from that meeting. Review every word I translated. Talk to Sarah Mills about the compliance research I did. Talk to Robert Chen about the regulatory violations I found. Don't sit here and tell me I manufactured anything." Gregory remained calm. "We are reviewing all relevant materials. However, given the serious nature of these allegations, we're placing you on administrative suspension pending the completion of our investigation." The room tilted. "Suspension. With pay," Patricia added, like that made it better. 2 weeks, possibly longer depending on findings. You'll need to surrender your building access badge and return any company materials in your possession." "You're joking. This is standard procedure for—" "I've been here 3 weeks, Daniel's voice cracked. 3 weeks and you're suspending me because someone complained that I did my job too well? "Mr. Hayes, I understand you're upset." "Upset?" Daniel laughed, the sound bitter. "I quit my last job for this. I moved my daughter into a life that depends on this paycheck. And now you're suspending me because what? Because I made Marcus Webb look bad." Patricia's expression flickered, just for a second, with something that might have been discomfort. "The investigation will be thorough and fair. If the allegations are unfounded, you'll be reinstated with full back pay for the suspension period. And if I'm not reinstated," Gregory closed his folder, "then your employment will be terminated for cause, which means no severance and no unemployment benefits." Daniel felt the floor drop out from under him. He thought about Emma in her new daycare, the good one with art classes that cost twice as much as the old place. About the apartment they'd just moved into because the landlord had finally agreed to let them out of the lease on the subsidized unit. About the stability he'd promised her. All of it balanced on a complaint from someone who couldn't stand that a janitor had shown him up. "I need to talk to Ms. Voss," Daniel said. "Ms. Voss is aware of the situation," Patricia said. "She's been informed of the complaint and the suspension." "Then I need to hear that from her." "That won't be possible during the investigation period. You're not to contact any Titanus employees. She hired me. She asked me to sit in that meeting. Mr. Hayes," Gregory's voice cut through, "continuing to argue will not help your case. The investigation is proceeding. You can either cooperate or make this more difficult for yourself." Daniel wanted to flip the desk, wanted to grab Gregory by his expensive tie and demand answers, wanted to do anything except stand there and take this. Instead, he pulled his badge from around his neck and set it on Patricia's desk. 2 weeks, he said. Or longer, Patricia confirmed. Daniel walked out of her office, down the hallway he'd crossed every morning for 3 weeks, past his office where files still sat open on his desk. Rachel was waiting by the elevators, her eyes red. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know what they were going to—" "It's fine." "It's not fine. Everyone knows this is Marcus. He went to the board and—" "Rachel." Daniel's voice came out flat. "I can't talk to you. Investigation protocols." Her face crumpled. "This is so wrong." The elevator arrived. Daniel stepped in and watched the doors close on Rachel's stricken expression, on the 47th floor, on the entire life he'd started building. By the time he reached the lobby, his phone was already buzzing. A text from Robert Chen. "I'm fighting this. Don't give up." Another from Sarah Mills. "Reviewing the complaint now. This won't stand." And one from a number he didn't recognize. "Hayes, this is Lena. Don't respond to this message. Don't contact anyone from the company. Let me handle this." Daniel walked out of Titanus Group at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday and realized he had nowhere to go. Emma was at daycare until 5. His apartment was empty. He'd structured his entire life around this job, and now he had 8 hours to kill with nothing to do but think about how fast everything could fall apart. He ended up at a coffee shop 3 blocks away, nursing a cup that cost too much while his phone buzzed with messages he couldn't respond to. The lunch rush came and went. Business people in suits ordered complicated drinks and talked about meetings and deadlines and all the normal concerns of people whose jobs weren't disintegrating. At 2 p.m., Daniel's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Hayes," he said finally. "Mr. Hayes, this is Lars Christensen. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Daniel closed his eyes. Of course, because this day needed to get worse. "Mr. Christensen, what can I do for you?" "I wanted to reach out personally regarding a matter that's come to my attention. I received a call this morning from someone at Titanus Group, a Mr. Marcus Webb, asking about our satisfaction with the recent contract negotiations." Daniel's hand tightened on his phone. "Mr. Webb seemed particularly interested in whether we felt you had overstepped during our discussions," Lars continued. "He suggested that perhaps your involvement had been inappropriate and that we might have concerns about the final terms." "And do you," Daniel asked, "have concerns?" Lars was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Hayes, you caught compliance violations that would have cost both our companies significant regulatory exposure. You did so with remarkable linguistic skill and professional discretion. The only concern I have is that someone at Titanus apparently doesn't appreciate what you did." That's one way to put it. "I'm calling because I want you to know that I've sent a formal letter to Ms. Voss expressing Christensen Group's complete satisfaction with your participation in our negotiations. I've also made it clear that any suggestion we were unhappy with your involvement is absolutely false." Daniel felt something crack in his chest. Why would you do that? Because what Mr. Webb attempted was unprofessional and dishonest. And because talent like yours shouldn't be punished for doing excellent work. Lars paused. "I also wanted to reiterate my previous offer. If things don't work out at Titanus, Christensen Group would be very interested in discussing opportunities." "I appreciate that," Daniel said. "Really? But I'm not looking to leave." "Even after this?" "Especially after this." Lars laughed. "Stubborn. I respect that. The offer stands regardless. Good luck, Mr. Hayes." After he hung up, Daniel sat in the coffee shop and tried to process what had just happened. Marcus had actually called their clients to build a case against him, had actually tried to sabotage the deal retroactively just to prove Daniel didn't belong. The worst part was, it might work. Daniel picked Emma up from daycare at 5, listening to her chatter about painting and snack time and how Tyler finally stopped knocking down her blocks. She didn't notice anything was wrong until they got home and he started making dinner at 4:30 instead of his usual 6. "Why are you home early?" Emma asked, climbing onto a kitchen chair. "Got the afternoon off," Daniel said, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "Is that good?" "Sure." Emma tilted her head, studying him with those sharp 5-year-old eyes that saw too much. "You look sad." "I'm fine, sweetheart." "Dad?" Daniel set down the knife. Just a hard day at work. Nothing for you to worry about. Are we going to be okay? The question hit him like a punch. She was 5 years old and already knew to ask if they were going to be okay. Already understood that stability was fragile. Daniel knelt down next to her chair. Yeah, baby, we're going to be okay. I promise. Emma hugged him, her small arms tight around his neck. You always keep promises. He hoped that was true. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his laptop and started going through his options. His savings account had about $4,000 now. Robert's loan repaid, first month in the new apartment covered, but not much cushion beyond that. If the suspension turned into termination, he'd need to find work fast. He pulled up job sites and started searching. Interpretation services, translation work, anything that matched his skill set. Most required certifications he didn't have, the ones that didn't pay barely more than the cleaning job. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. I hear at building you have troubles at work. If you need help with Emma, don't worry about paying right away. Daniel stared at the message and felt his throat tighten. Even Mrs. Chen knew. The building gossip network was faster than email. He typed back, Thank you, I'll let you know. Another buzz. This one from Robert. Talk to Lena. She's livid. Board meeting tomorrow to discuss the complaint. Don't lose hope. Hope felt like a luxury Daniel couldn't afford. He spent the next day in his apartment, avoiding the phone, avoiding the neighbors, avoiding everything except Emma. They went to the park, played on the swings, fed ducks at the pond with bread heels that should have been lunch. This is fun, Emma said, throwing bread to an aggressive mallard. Can we do this every day? Maybe not every day, Daniel said, but sometimes, yeah, sometimes. That evening, his phone rang. Lena Voss. Daniel answered, I thought I wasn't supposed to contact company employees. You're not contacting me. I'm contacting you. Lena's voice was tight with controlled anger. Board meeting was this afternoon. I've seen the complaint. It's 20 pages of Marcus Webb trying to rewrite what happened in the Christensen meeting to make you look like a rogue employee who violated protocol. And it's complete garbage, but it's well-documented garbage. He's got timestamps, policy citations, even a statement from one of our interpreters saying she felt undermined by your presence. Daniel closed his eyes. So I'm done. Not yet. I've got Lars Christensen's letter stating unequivocally that your involvement was professional and valuable. I've got Sarah's documentation showing you prevented regulatory violations. I've got Robert backing everything you did. Lena paused. But the board is nervous. Marcus is senior leadership. You're new. They're worried about precedent. Precedent for what? Doing good work? Precedent for promoting someone without traditional qualifications and having it blow up in their faces. They're worried about liability, about hierarchy, about all the corporate bullshit that matters when lawyers get involved. So what happens now? The investigation continues. Gregory Nash interviews everyone involved, reviews all documentation, makes a recommendation to the board. Lena's voice softened slightly. I'm fighting for you, Hayes, but I need you to understand this might not go the way we want. I understand. Do you? Because if they terminate you, Marcus wins, and every other executive who thinks people like you don't belong at this level gets validated. Daniel looked at Emma's drawing on his refrigerator, the one of him in a suit. What do you want me to do? Be patient. Let the investigation run. Don't do anything stupid. Lena hesitated. And Hayes, start thinking about what you want. Because even if you win this fight, the company that hired you just showed you what happens when you make the wrong person angry. She hung up. Daniel sat in his dark apartment and thought about that. About what it meant to win a fight but lose the war. About whether staying at Titanus was worth it if every success came with someone trying to tear him down. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Lars Christensen. I spoke with Ms. Voss today. The offer I made stands, but I understand loyalty. Whatever you decide, you have support here. You, and another from an unknown number. This is Marcus Webb. You should have stayed in your lane. This is what happens when people forget their place. Daniel deleted Marcus's message without reading it twice. The next week crawled by like something dying. Daniel tried to keep routine for Emma's sake. Breakfast, daycare, playground, dinner, bedtime. But the hours when she was gone stretched out endless and empty. He couldn't work. Couldn't contact anyone from Titanus. Couldn't do anything except wait while other people decided his future. On day 8 of the suspension, Gregory Nash called. "Mr. Hayes, I'd like to schedule an interview as part of the investigation. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., if you're available." "Where?" "There's a legal office on Madison Avenue. I'll send you the address." "Why not at Titanus?" "We prefer to conduct these interviews in neutral locations." Gregory's tone was professionally bland. "Will tomorrow work?" Daniel wanted to say no. Wanted to tell Gregory to shove his investigation, but he'd already lost too much to throw away what little chance he had left. "I'll be there," he said. The legal office was exactly as soulless as Daniel expected. Gray carpet, beige walls, furniture designed for function over comfort. Gregory was already there with a recording device and a stack of folders. "Thank you for coming," Gregory said, gesturing to a chair. "This interview will be recorded for documentation purposes. You're welcome to have legal representation present if you'd like." "Can't afford a lawyer," Daniel said. "That's your choice." "Let's begin." Gregory pressed record. "Please state your name and position for the record." "Daniel Hayes, Director of International Relations, currently suspended." "Mr. Hayes, I want to walk through the events of the Christensen Group negotiation. Can you describe your role in that meeting?" Daniel went through it methodically, what Lena had asked him to do, what he'd heard, what he'd reported, the regulatory violations he'd found in his research. Gregory took notes, his expression revealing nothing. "Did Ms. Voss explicitly authorize you to speak during the negotiation?" "She told me to flag anything that felt wrong." "Did she tell you to confront the Christensen executives directly about compliance investigations?" "She told me to do my job." "That's not what I asked." Daniel leaned forward. "You want me to say I went rogue? That I acted without authorization?" "I didn't. Everything I did was exactly what Lena hired me to do." "Ms. Voss," Gregory corrected. "And the issue isn't whether you were doing what you believed she wanted. The issue is whether you followed established protocol for contract negotiations." "What protocol?" "There's no protocol for what I do because no one else here does it." Gregory made a note. "Let's talk about your qualifications. You don't have certification as a professional interpreter, correct?" "Correct." "No degree in linguistics or international relations?" "No." "No formal training in contract law or negotiation strategy?" "No." "So your claim to expertise is based entirely on languages you picked up while working various jobs overseas. Jobs which, according to your employment history, you can't fully document." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "I can document that I prevented Titanus from signing a contract with $50 million in buried liability." "Can you?" Gregory pulled out another folder. "Because I've reviewed the Christensen contract extensively. The compliance section you flagged could be interpreted multiple ways. It's not clear that the language definitively created the exposure you claimed." Talk to Sarah Mills. She reviewed the same section and agreed, "Ms. Mills provided an opinion based on your interpretation. That doesn't make your interpretation correct." Gregory leaned back. "What I'm seeing, Mr. Hayes, is a pattern of someone with limited credentials making assertions that can't be independently verified, then claiming vindication when outcomes happen to align with those assertions. That's not what happened." "Isn't it? You claim to have overheard conversations in multiple languages. No one else in that room could verify what you heard because no one else speaks all those languages. You claim those conversations revealed hidden intentions, but all we have is your word." Daniel stood up. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I'm saying that your unique position makes it impossible to verify your claims through normal channels, and that creates liability for Titanus. The only liability was the contract I prevented you from signing." Gregory pressed stop on the recorder. "Mr. Hayes, let me be frank with you. The complaint against you raises legitimate concerns about oversight and accountability. Marcus Webb has been with this company for 12 years. He's built relationships, earned trust, proven himself through traditional channels. You've been here 3 weeks. From the company's perspective, one of these people has credibility, the other doesn't. So it doesn't matter that I was right. It matters that we can't verify you were right in a way that protects the company legally, and it matters that senior leadership is concerned about precedent." Gregory started packing up his folders. "The investigation will conclude next week. You'll be notified of the findings." "And then what?" "Then the board makes a decision about your employment. Daniel left the legal office feeling like he'd just been systematically dismantled. Every qualification he didn't have, every credential he couldn't provide, every bit of documentation that didn't exist because he'd learned languages from survival instead of classrooms. All of it used as evidence that he didn't belong. His phone rang as he walked to the subway. Sarah Mills. "Hayes, I just got out of my interview with Gregory," she said without preamble. "He's building a case for termination. I tried to explain that your work on Christensen was critical, but he kept circling back to verification and protocol." "I know. I just talked to him." "This is wrong. Marcus manufactured this complaint because you made him look bad. Everyone knows it." "Doesn't matter what everyone knows. Matters what the board believes." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "There might be another option. Robert and I have been talking. If the board terminates you, we're prepared to resign in protest." Daniel stopped walking. "Don't do that." "Why not? You saved this company millions if they're going to punish you for it. Sarah, you've got 12 years in corporate law. Robert's got a family and a mortgage. Don't throw that away because of me. It's not just because of you. It's about what kind of company this is. If Titanus rewards people like Marcus and punishes people like you, then maybe it's not somewhere I want to work." "Don't make that decision yet," Daniel said. "Wait and see what the board does." "Hayes, please, just wait." After he hung up, Daniel sat on a bench outside the subway station and tried to process what Sarah had just offered. 2 senior employees willing to walk away rather than watch him get railroaded. Part of him was grateful. Part of him was terrified that his presence was about to destroy careers beyond his own. That evening, Emma asked if he was going back to work soon. "I don't know, sweetheart," Daniel said honestly. "What if you don't?" "Then I'll find another job." Emma considered this seriously. "Will it be a good job?" "I'll make it good." "Okay." She went back to coloring, apparently satisfied. Daniel wished he had her faith. The investigation conclusion came on a Friday afternoon, day 13 of his suspension. An email from Gregory Nash marked high priority. Daniel opened it with hands that weren't quite steady. "Mr. Hayes, the investigation into the complaint regarding your conduct during the Christensen Group negotiation has concluded. Our findings indicate that while your intentions may have been aligned with company interests, your actions violated several established protocols for contract negotiations and created potential liability exposure through unverified interpretation services. Specifically, 1. You provided interpretation without proper certification or legal oversight. 2. You independently confronted client representatives without explicit authorization from senior leadership. 3. You made claims about regulatory violations that could not be independently verified through standard compliance channels. The investigation acknowledges that the Christensen contract was ultimately restructured in a manner that may have benefited Titanus Group. However, this outcome does not excuse protocol violations or eliminate concerns about accountability. After careful review, the recommendation to the board is termination of employment for cause, effective immediately. However, in recognition of Ms. Voss's strong advocacy on your behalf and statements from other senior staff, the board has agreed to an alternative resolution. You may resign voluntarily with 4 weeks severance pay and a neutral employment reference. This option allows you to pursue other opportunities without a termination on your record. You have 48 hours to accept this offer. If you decline, termination proceedings will move forward. Regards, Gregory Nash, Legal Compliance Division. Daniel read the email 3 times, then he read it again. They were giving him an out, a way to leave without being fired, with enough money to survive while he found something else. All he had to do was walk away. Admit that Marcus had won. That the janitor who thought he could sit at the executive table had been wrong. That people without credentials and degrees and traditional paths didn't belong in buildings like Titanus Group. His phone rang. "Lena." "You got the email," she said. "Yeah. I'm sorry, I fought as hard as I could, but the board—" "I know, it's fine." "It's not fine, this is complete garbage and we both know it." Lena's voice was sharp with frustration. "Marcus orchestrated this whole thing and they're letting him get away with it because he's been here longer and has the right credentials on paper." "So what do I do?" "That's up to you. The severance offer is decent, more than I could get them to agree to for a straight termination. 4 weeks' pay will give you breathing room to find something else. Or I could fight it. You could. But Hayes, you need to understand what that means. Fighting means lawyers, depositions, potentially months of hearings. And even if you win, you'd be coming back to a company where half the executive team thinks you don't belong. Daniel looked at Emma's drawing on his refrigerator. What would you do? Lena was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me says take the severance and find somewhere that appreciates what you can do. Part of me says fight because giving in to people like Marcus just validates everything wrong with corporate hierarchies. That's not an answer. No, it's not. Because this is your life, Hayes, your daughter, your future. I can't tell you what's worth fighting for. After she hung up, Daniel sat at his kitchen table and tried to think clearly. 4 weeks severance meant about $8,000 after taxes. Enough to cover rent and expenses for maybe 2 months if he was careful. Enough to find another job, maybe not at Titanus' salary level, but something stable. The smart move was to take it. The safe move was to walk away. But Daniel kept thinking about Emma asking if they were going to be okay, about the promise he'd made that he'd keep them stable, about the look on Marcus's face when he'd realized Daniel had caught every word in that conference room, about what it meant to belong somewhere, not because you fit the mold, but because you did work that mattered. He opened his laptop and started typing. Mr. Nash, I decline your offer. I did not violate protocol. I did the job I was hired to do, and I did it well. If Titanus Group wants to fire me for that, then they can fire me. But I'm not resigning. Daniel Hayes. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Then he picked up his phone and called Mrs. Chen. I might need you to watch Emma extra hours next week, he said, and I might not be able to pay you right away. Of course, Mrs. Chen said immediately. You are good father, good man. You fight for what is right. Emma and I will be fine. Thank you. Daniel, Mrs. Chen's voice softened. You belong where you work. Don't let them tell you different. After he hung up, Daniel sat in his quiet apartment and felt the decision settle over him like armor. He'd already lost everything once before, drifted across countries with nothing but the languages he picked up along the way. He'd survived then, and he'd survive now. But this time, he wasn't walking away. This time, he was going to make them look him in the eye while they did it. Gregory Nash's response arrived within an hour, tersely professional and edged with what Daniel could only describe as irritation barely held in check. Mr. Hayes, your decision has been noted. Termination proceedings will move forward as outlined. You will receive formal notice within 3 business days. Final paycheck and accrued benefits will be processed according to standard protocol. Please return all company property by end of business Monday. Gregory Nash. Daniel stared at the email and felt the enormity of what he'd just done settle into his bones. He'd turned down severance pay, turned down the safe exit, chosen instead to be fired for doing his job well, which meant no unemployment benefits, no buffer, nothing but the few $1,000s in his account, and whatever work he could scrape together fast enough to keep the lights on. Emma wandered into the kitchen with her stuffed rabbit, dragging it by one ear. Dad, can we have mac and cheese for dinner? Sure, sweetheart. The good kind? The good kind meant the organic stuff from the health food store that cost 3 times as much as the box stuff. Daniel looked at his daughter's hopeful face and thought about the math he'd just done. How many boxes of cheap mac and cheese he could buy with what he'd turned down? Yeah, he said. The good kind. Emma beamed and went back to her coloring book. Daniel made dinner on autopilot, his mind spinning through options. He could reach back out to Lars Christensen, take that job offer in Copenhagen. Except that meant uprooting Emma, moving to a country where she didn't speak the language, starting over completely. He could look for interpretation work locally, freelance stuff, contract gigs. Except most of that required certifications he didn't have and paid barely enough to cover rent. Or he could find another cleaning job and pretend the last month had never happened. His phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Heard you declined the severance. You're either very brave or very stupid, possibly both. Board meeting is Monday 9 a.m. That's when they'll formalize the termination. Another text, this one from Sarah. Robert and I are submitting our resignations Monday morning. We're not staying at a company that does this. Daniel called Sarah immediately. Don't, he said when she answered. We already decided. Sarah, you can't quit over this. You've got a career. I've got a career at a company that just proved it values politics over competence. That's not somewhere I want to build a future. Sarah's voice was steady, determined. Robert feels the same way. We talked to 3 other people on the international team. They're considering walking out too. Daniel sat down hard. You're going to start a mass exodus because of me, not because of you. Because of what happened to you. There's a difference. Sarah paused. Hayes, what they're doing sets a precedent that anyone without traditional credentials can be pushed out the moment they make someone uncomfortable. If we let that stand, we're complicit. You could get blacklisted. Other companies might not want to hire someone who resigned in protest. Maybe. Or maybe they'll see people who have principles. Sarah's tone softened. Look, I know you're trying to protect us, but we're adults making our own choices. You're not responsible for what we decide. After she hung up, Daniel sat in his kitchen and tried to process the fact that his fight was becoming other people's fight, that his decision to push back had rippled out into something bigger than just him keeping his job. The weight of it felt crushing. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety masked as normal. Daniel took Emma to the playground, read her stories at bedtime, made breakfast like everything was fine. Sunday night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling and thinking about the board meeting happening in less than 12 hours. By the time Monday morning arrived, Daniel had slept maybe 3 hours total. He got Emma to daycare early and then stood outside Titanus Group at 8:45 a.m., looking up at the building he'd been banned from entering. His badge was gone, surrendered during the suspension. He had no way to get past security, no access to the floors where his career was about to be officially ended. But he could wait. Jerome was at the security desk doing the morning check-in routine. He looked up when Daniel approached and his expression shifted into something complicated. Hayes, man, I heard what happened. That's messed up. Yeah. You here to see someone? Not allowed to, Daniel said. Just wanted to be nearby when it happens, I guess. Jerome glanced toward the elevators, then back at Daniel. He lowered his voice. Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but there's a lot of people upstairs who think this whole thing is garbage. Like, a lot. The word going around is that half the international team is ready to walk if they go through with firing you. I heard. Then you know it's bigger than just you now. Jerome leaned forward. You got people willing to risk their own jobs because they believe you got screwed. That means something. Daniel wanted to believe that, wanted to think that people standing up mattered more than corporate politics and established hierarchies. But he'd been around long enough to know that belief and reality didn't always line up. At 9:02 a.m., Robert Chen walked out of the elevator and spotted Daniel immediately. He crossed the lobby in long strides, his expression grim. You shouldn't be here, Robert said. I know. The board meeting just started. Lena's making a final pitch to reverse the termination decision. Robert glanced back toward the elevators. It's not looking good. Marcus showed up with 3 other senior directors backing his complaint. They're framing this as a referendum on hiring standards and protocol enforcement. So I'm the cautionary tale. You're the scapegoat. Robert's jaw tightened. But Sarah and I submitted our resignations an hour ago, effective immediately if they terminate you. 3 others from International Relations did the same. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Robert, you don't have to. We already did. And before you try to talk us out of it, understand that this isn't charity. This is 5 experienced professionals telling the board that their decision has consequences. Robert checked his watch. The meeting should wrap in about 30 minutes. You'll get the official notice by email. And then what? Then Titanus Group either realizes they just lost a significant portion of their international division over corporate politics, or they double down and pretend it was worth it. Robert extended his hand. Either way, it's been an honor working with you, Hayes. Daniel shook his hand, throat tight. You too. Robert headed back to the elevators, leaving Daniel alone in the lobby with Jerome and a handful of employees streaming in for the workday. None of them looked at him. Why would they? He was nobody. Just another person who hadn't made it past the corporate filters. At 9:34 a.m., Daniel's phone buzzed. An email from Gregory Nash with the subject line, Termination Notice. Daniel opened it standing in the lobby of the building where he'd thought he might actually build something that lasted. Mr. Hayes, following the conclusion of our investigation and subsequent board review, Titanus Group has made the decision to terminate your employment effective immediately for violations of company protocol and failure to adhere to established standards for contract negotiation procedures. Your final paycheck, including accrued vacation time, will be processed and direct deposited within 5 business days. You're required to return all company property, including laptop, phone, and any proprietary materials by 5 p.m. today. This decision is final. There is no appeals process. Gregory Nash. Daniel read it twice, then put his phone away. So that was it. 4 weeks at Titanus Group, from janitor to director to unemployed in less than a month. He was halfway to the subway when his phone rang. Lena. Where are you? She asked. Leaving. Don't. Come back to the building. Visitor entrance. Lena, I just got the termination notice. I know. Come back anyway. Trust me. She hung up before he could argue. Daniel stood on the corner of Madison and 42nd, watching traffic flow past, trying to decide if going back was going to make this worse or just extend the humiliation. Then he turned around and walked back to Titanus Group. The visitor entrance was around the side, a smaller lobby usually used for deliveries and non-employee meetings. Lena was waiting there with Sarah and Robert, all 3 of them looking like they'd just come from battle. What's going on? Daniel asked. Lena handed him a folder. The board approved your termination at 9:28. At 9:31, Robert and Sarah's resignations became official. At 9:33, 3 more senior staff from International Relations submitted notices. At 9:36, I informed the board that losing 6 experienced professionals over 1 termination was going to cost approximately $4 million in recruitment, training, and project delays. Daniel opened the folder. Inside was a contract, new employment terms, effective immediately. What is this? Reinstatement, Sarah said. Full position restoration, back pay for the suspension period, and a formal apology from the board for procedural errors in the investigation. Daniel stared at the contract, the words blurring together. How? The board realized that Marcus's complaint was going to cost them more than just you, Robert said. Losing half the international division would have been a disaster, so they had a choice, back down or watch their entire negotiation capacity collapse. They backed down, Lena finished. Barely. By a single vote. Daniel looked up from the contract. What about Marcus? Reassigned to domestic operations, Lena said, her smile sharp. Effective immediately. He no longer has authority over international accounts. And Gregory Nash? Still in legal compliance, but the board made it clear that his investigation process needs review. Sarah's expression was satisfied. Turns out 6 resignation letters in 30 minutes gets people's attention. Daniel felt like the ground had shifted under him again, except this time in a direction he hadn't expected. So I'm not fired. You're not fired, Lena confirmed, assuming you sign that contract and come back to work. What if I don't want to? The words came out before Daniel could stop them. What if I'm tired of fighting for a job at a company that just spent 2 weeks trying to prove I don't belong here? The question hung in the air. Lena studied him for a long moment. Then don't sign it. Walk away. Take the severance offer. We can still make that happen. Go work for Lars Christensen in Copenhagen or find something else where you don't have to prove yourself every single day. That's not much of a sales pitch, Daniel said. I'm not selling you anything. I'm telling you the truth. Lena crossed her arms. You're right that this company just put you through hell over politics and hierarchy. You're right that coming back means working with people who tried to destroy your career, but you're also the best at what you do, and Titanus needs that. The question is whether you need this. Daniel thought about Emma asking if they were going to be okay, about the apartment with the good daycare nearby, about the notebook full of languages learned from necessity that had finally, against all odds, turned into something that mattered. He thought about Marcus Webb's face when he'd been caught in that conference room, and he thought about what it meant to walk away versus what it meant to stay and prove every single day that he belonged exactly where he was. If I sign this, Daniel said slowly, I need something beyond reinstatement. Name it, Lena said. I want documentation protocols revised so that what happened to me can't happen to someone else. I want clear guidelines for interpretation services that don't require certification when the work demonstrates competence. And I want it on record that non-traditional backgrounds aren't disqualifiers. Sarah pulled out her phone and started typing. I can draft that. Anything else? Lena asked. Daniel looked at Robert. I want Robert's loan forgiven. Absolutely not, Robert said immediately. Not your call. Daniel kept his eyes on Lena. $2,000. Company covers it as a signing bonus. Lena nodded. Done. Hayes, that's not necessary, Robert started. You put your career on the line for me, Daniel cut him off. Let me do this. Robert's expression softened. You're stubborn as hell. Yeah, I am. Daniel signed the contract right there in the visitor lobby, using a pen Sarah handed him while Jerome watched from the security desk with a grin spreading across his face. Welcome back, Lena said when he finished. Now get upstairs. We have a deal closing Wednesday that needs your attention. Daniel took the temporary badge Rachel had prepared and headed for the elevators. This time when he crossed the lobby, people did look at him, some with curiosity, some with respect, a few with the kind of resentment that meant they'd sided with Marcus and lost. He didn't care. The 47th floor felt different when he stepped off the elevator. Rachel looked up from her desk and her face broke into a genuine smile. Mr. Hayes, welcome back. Thanks, Rachel. His office was exactly as he'd left it. Files still open on the desk, coffee mugs still sitting by the keyboard. Like the last 2 weeks had been a bad dream that reality had finally corrected. Daniel sat down in his leather chair and pulled up his email. 300 unread messages, meeting requests, contract reviews. A welcome back note from the IT department saying his access had been restored, and one message from an address he didn't recognize with the subject line, "You should have taken the severance." Daniel opened it. Hayes, congratulations on your reinstatement. Enjoy it while it lasts. People like you don't survive long at this level. You got lucky once, twice, maybe, but eventually you'll make a mistake. And when you do, I'll be there to make sure everyone remembers that the janitor was never qualified to sit at the table. Marcus. Daniel read it once, then deleted it without responding. Let Marcus sit in domestic operations and stew. Daniel had work to do. He spent the rest of Monday catching up, reviewing the deals that had moved forward during his suspension, preparing for Wednesday's negotiation. Around 3 p.m., there was a knock on his door. A woman in her mid-20s stood there, nervous but determined. Mr. Hayes? I'm Jennifer Park from the international team. I wanted to introduce myself. I heard what happened and She paused, gathering courage. I graduated from a state school. No Ivy League credentials. I almost didn't apply here because I thought I wouldn't fit. But what you did, standing up to them, that mattered to people like me. Daniel stood up and shook her hand. Nice to meet you, Jennifer. I know you're busy, but if you ever need help with research or translation work, I speak Korean and Mandarin. I'd be honored to assist. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you. After she left, 2 more people stopped by. Then 4. Then a steady stream of employees from different departments, some he'd met, most he hadn't, all wanting to say they were glad he was back, that what had happened to him wasn't right, that seeing him reinstated gave them hope. By 5 p.m., Daniel's head was spinning. He picked Emma up from daycare, and she ran to him with her arms out, chattering about painting and how she made a picture of a giraffe that looked more like a snake. How was your day, Dad? She asked in the car. Long. Good, though. Did you win? Daniel thought about that. Yeah, sweetheart, I think I did. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his notebook. He turned to a fresh page and wrote, Day 34, reinstated, back pay coming. 6 people were willing to walk away for me. Marcus lost. Then he paused and added, This isn't over. But maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe fighting and winning can be the same thing. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Titanus Group at 7:45 a.m. to find Lena already in conference room 3 with a stack of contracts and a pot of coffee that looked industrial strength. Sit, she said without preamble. Wednesday's deal is with Nakamura Industries out of Osaka. Medical technology, $60 million in potential revenue. They've been stalling on final terms for 3 weeks, and I need to know why. Daniel pulled up the contract files on his laptop. What's the sticking point? Distribution rights in Southeast Asia. They keep asking for revisions that don't make sense given the market projections. Lena slid a folder across the table. These are transcripts from the last 4 negotiation calls. Our interpreter flagged some inconsistencies, but couldn't pin down what was actually being said versus what was being translated. Daniel started reading, his mind automatically shifting into the pattern recognition mode that had become second nature. The transcripts were in English, but underneath he could see the structure of Japanese business language, formal, layered with implication. By page 6, he found it. "They're not stalling," Daniel said. "They're negotiating with someone else simultaneously and using our terms as leverage." Lena leaned forward. "How do you know?" "The phrasing here," Daniel pointed to a section. "When Nakamura's VP says we need time to consider regional implications, that's not a delay tactic. In Japanese business culture, that specific phrase signals they're comparing offers. And here," he flipped to another page, "they reference coordinating with regional partners, but the grammar structure suggests future partnerships, not current ones. So they're shopping our deal to competitors. Probably. The question is whether they're actually interested in Thai tennis or just using us to drive up another offer." Lena sat back, her expression calculating. "Can you tell which one?" Daniel went through the rest of the transcripts, pulling out phrases and contextual markers. By the time he finished, he had a clear picture. "They want the Titanes deal," he said, "but they've got pressure from a Japanese competitor who's offering better distribution terms. They're trying to force us to match without admitting that's what they're doing." "Who's the competitor?" "Can't tell from these transcripts, but if I had to guess..." Daniel pulled up a market analysis report. "Yamato Medical. They've been expanding into Southeast Asia for the last year. Nakamura mentioning regional coordination 3 times in the same call. That's deliberate signaling." Lena grabbed her phone and fired off a text. "Robert, I need everything we have on Yamato Medical's recent distribution deals. Now." The response came back in under a minute. "On it." "Wednesday's meeting is at 2 p.m., Lena said to Daniel. "I want you there, full participation, not just observation." "You sure that's a good idea after what just happened?" "You just decoded 3 weeks of stalled negotiations in 20 minutes. Yeah, I'm sure." Lena stood up. "And Hayes? Stop asking if you belong here. You proved that already." Wednesday arrived with the kind of pressure that made Daniel's morning coffee taste like anxiety. The Nakamura meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., which meant he had exactly 5 hours to prepare, review cultural protocols, and try not to think about the fact that this was his first major negotiation since being reinstated. No pressure. Robert stopped by his office at 11 with a stack of files on Yamato Medical. "Everything I could find. They closed a distribution deal with Singapore Medical Supply 2 months ago. Terms were aggressive, below market pricing in exchange for exclusivity." Daniel flipped through the documentation. "That matches what Nakamura's doing. They're trying to leverage our offer to avoid getting locked into Yamato's exclusivity terms. So we have negotiating room. We have leverage. Different thing." At 1:45 p.m., Daniel stood outside conference room 1 and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Sarah walked past and paused. "You look nervous," she said. "Little bit." "Good. Means you care." She smiled. "Go show them why reinstating you was the only decision that made sense." The Nakamura team arrived precisely at 2 p.m. 5 executives, all men, all in expensive suits that made Daniel's off-the-rack option look like a costume. They bowed slightly when introduced, then settled into chairs with the kind of practiced efficiency that spoke of hundreds of negotiations. Lena handled the opening pleasantries in flawless Japanese, which surprised Daniel until he remembered she hadn't gotten to CEO by accident. Then she transitioned to English and got down to business. "We appreciate your patience as we've worked through the distribution terms," Lena said. "I understand there have been concerns about regional coordination." The lead Nakamura executive, Tanaka, late 50s, silver hair, nodded carefully. "Yes. The Southeast Asian market presents unique challenges. We must ensure proper regional alignment before committing to exclusive distribution." The interpreter translated smoothly, but Daniel caught the subtle shift in Tanaka's phrasing. The Japanese version had said, "before committing to any distribution arrangement," not "exclusive distribution." Small difference. Critical meaning. Lena glanced at Daniel. He gave a tiny nod. "I understand completely," Lena said. "In fact, we've been reviewing our regional strategy and believe we can offer more flexibility than the Yamato arrangement would allow." Tanaka's expression didn't change, but 2 of his colleagues shifted slightly. The interpreter started to translate, then paused. clearly unsure how to handle the fact that Lena had just named their competing offer. "I'm not sure what you mean," Tanaka said carefully in English. "I mean that Yamato Medical's exclusivity terms would lock Nakamura into a single distribution channel," Lena continued calmly, "which limits your growth potential. Titanus is offering partnership terms, not ownership terms." One of the younger executives leaned forward and said something rapidly in Japanese. Daniel caught it clearly. "How do they know about Yamato?" Tanaka responded in Japanese, his tone sharp. "It doesn't matter. Stay focused on our position." Daniel waited until the interpreter finished a diplomatic version of the exchange, then spoke up. "Tanaka-san, if I may." He switched to Japanese, keeping his tone respectful. "We're not interested in limiting your regional expansion. We understand Yamato's offer is attractive in the short term, but their exclusivity requirements would prevent you from adapting to market changes. Our proposal gives you flexibility to grow without restrictions." The room went completely silent. Tanaka stared at Daniel for a long moment. Then he responded in Japanese, his words measured. "Your Japanese is quite good for an American." "Thank you. I worked in Osaka for 6 months, learned that regional partnerships work best when both sides have room to maneuver." Tanaka's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something close. He said something to his team in Japanese, too rapid for the interpreter to follow. "This one understands. Perhaps we've been approaching this wrong." Then he switched back to English. "Mr. Hayes makes an interesting point. Perhaps we should discuss the flexibility terms in more detail." The meeting ran for another 90 minutes. By the time Nakamura's team left, the distribution terms had been restructured with non-exclusive language, regional growth provisions, and revenue sharing that actually worked for both sides. The deal was worth $58 million instead of $60, but it was clean. No buried exclusivity traps, no leverage games. After they left, Lena turned to Daniel. "Where did you learn to negotiate in Japanese?" "I didn't. I just spoke to him the way dock supervisors used to speak to me. Directly. No corporate games. Turns out that works in conference rooms, too." Lena laughed. A real laugh. Not the professional version. "Robert was right. You do belong here." That evening, Daniel picked Emma up from the Good Daycare and took her to the park. She climbed on the jungle gym while he sat on a bench and watched the sun track across the sky. His phone buzzed. A text from Lars Christensen. "Heard about your reinstatement. Congratulations. The offer still stands if you ever change your mind, but I suspect you're exactly where you're meant to be." Daniel typed back. "Thank you. I think you're right." Emma ran over, breathless and grinning. "Dad, I made it to the top." "That's my girl. Can we get ice cream?" Daniel thought about his bank account, now stabilized with back pay and regular salary. Thought about the raises that would come if he kept proving himself. Thought about the future that was starting to look less like survival and more like something sustainable. "Yeah," he said, "we can get ice cream." They walked to the ice cream shop 3 blocks away, Emma's hand in his, chattering about her day. And for the first time in longer than Daniel could remember, he wasn't doing math in his head about what they could afford. Wasn't wondering if next month would be the month everything fell apart. He was just a dad getting ice cream with his daughter on a Wednesday evening. Simple. Normal. Earned. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel opened his notebook to write the day's entry. But instead of documenting what happened, he found himself writing something different. "Emma asked me once if we were going to be okay. I told her yes. Today, I actually believed it. This job almost destroyed me. Almost proved that people like me don't belong in buildings like Titanus, but I'm still here, still employed, still fighting. Marcus was wrong. The board was wrong. Everyone who thought a janitor couldn't sit at the executive table was wrong. Not because I'm perfect, not because I don't make mistakes, but because I show up, I do the work, and I refuse to disappear just because it's easier for everyone else. Tomorrow there will be another negotiation, another deal, another chance to prove that credentials aren't the same as competence, and I'll be ready." Daniel closed the notebook and looked at the clock. Almost midnight. In 7 hours, he'd wake up, get Emma ready for daycare, and head back to Titanus Group. Back to the 47th floor where he'd gone from invisible to indispensable in less than 6 weeks. Back to proving that belonging wasn't something you were given. It was something you fought for every single day. And he wasn't done fighting yet. 3 months after his reinstatement, Daniel stood in Lena's office at 7 in the morning with coffee going cold in his hand and a problem that didn't have an easy answer. "The Varelli Consortium wants you specifically," Lena said, sliding a folder across her desk. "They're renegotiating terms on the original contract, and they refuse to proceed without you in the room." Daniel opened the folder. The deal had grown. What started as $300 million was now approaching $500 million with expanded operations across 6 countries. "When?" "Friday. Rome." "That's 3 days." "I'm aware." Lena leaned back in her chair. "They made it clear that your presence is non-negotiable. After what happened with Christensen and Nakamura, word got around that Titanis has someone who actually understands what's being said instead of what people want heard." Daniel thought about Emma, about the careful routine they'd finally built: breakfast together, daycare drop-off, evening pickup, dinner at the table where she told him about her day. 3 days in Rome meant disrupting all of that. "I'll need to arrange childcare," he said. "Company will cover it. Full support services, whatever you need." Lena's expression softened slightly. "I know asking you to travel internationally is complicated with Emma. If this doesn't work—" "It works," Daniel cut in. "I'll make it work." But later that afternoon, sitting in his apartment while Emma built towers with blocks, Daniel wasn't sure he believed his own words. Mrs. Chen could watch Emma overnight, but 3 days felt different. 3 days meant Emma going to bed without him there. Meant missing bedtime stories and morning pancakes and all the small routines that made her feel safe. "Dad, you're not watching," Emma said, pointing at her tower. "Sorry, sweetheart. That's really tall." "The tallest." She added another block carefully. "Are you going away?" Daniel's chest tightened. "I might have to travel for work. Just a few days." Emma's face fell. "How many days?" 3, maybe 4? That's a lot of sleeps." "I know." Daniel knelt down beside her. "But Mrs. Chen would stay with you, and I'd call every night before bed." Emma was quiet, her small hands arranging blocks with careful precision. Finally, she looked up at him. "Is it important? The work?" "Yeah, it's important." "Then you should go." She said it with the same serious tone she used when explaining why vegetables were necessary. "Important things are worth missing sleeps for." Daniel hugged her, breathing in strawberry shampoo and childhood courage. "When did you get so smart?" "I was always smart," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You just finally noticed." Friday morning arrived gray and cold. Daniel's flight left at 9 a.m., which meant leaving the apartment at 6 to make it through security. Emma was still half asleep when he kissed her forehead, mumbling something about rabbits before rolling over. Mrs. Chen arrived at 5:45 with an overnight bag and a determined expression. "Don't worry about Emma. We'll have a good time. You go do important work." "Thank you." "Really?" "You are a good father, Daniel. Good man. Emma knows this. She'll be fine." The flight to Rome was long and gave Daniel too much time to think. He reviewed contracts, studied background files on the Varelli executives, and tried not to calculate how many hours until he could call Emma before bedtime. Lena was already at the hotel when he arrived, working through emails in the lobby bar with the focus of someone who'd long ago stopped noticing jet lag. "You look tired," she said when Daniel sat down. 8-hour flight with a layover in London. "Get some sleep. Meetings tomorrow at 10 a.m. Varelli's team is bringing their full executive board, 12 people, half of them from regional offices. This is going to be intense." Daniel ordered coffee he didn't need and stared out at Roman streets he was too exhausted to appreciate. "Why'd they specifically request me?" "Because you're the only person they trust to tell them what's actually being said." Lena closed her laptop. "Hayes, you realize what you've become, right? In 3 months, you've gone from controversial hire to the person international clients specifically request. That's not luck." "Feels like luck." "It's not." Lena's expression was serious. "It's skill that most people don't have and can't fake. Don't diminish that." The meeting the next morning took place in a conference room overlooking the Colosseum, which felt almost aggressively symbolic. The Varelli Consortium arrived with exactly 12 executives, just as Lena had predicted, representing operations from Italy, Spain, Germany, Belgium, and 2 regional offices Daniel didn't immediately recognize: The lead executive was the same silver-haired man from the original negotiation, Antonio Varelli, patriarch of the family business, 72 years old and still sharp enough to negotiate circles around most people. "Mr. Hayes," Antonio said in Italian, his handshake firm. "I'm pleased you could join us. The last time we met, you saved us from making a very expensive mistake." "Just doing my job," Daniel replied in Italian. "Your job is apparently reading minds." Antonio smiled. "Let's see if you can do it again." The negotiations started simply enough. Expansion terms, revised distribution channels, updated compliance requirements, standard corporate language delivered in professional tones. Then around hour 2, things shifted. One of the Spanish executives started speaking rapidly to his Belgian counterpart in what sounded like French but had Catalan influences. Daniel caught the gist immediately. They were discussing moving certain operations through a Luxembourg subsidiary to avoid Spanish tax implications. The interpreter translated it as coordinating regional logistics. Daniel made a note, but didn't interrupt. 20 minutes later, the German representative mentioned something in Swiss German about alternative documentation timelines that the interpreter rendered as flexible reporting structures. Daniel made another note. By hour 3, he had a clear picture. Varelli was trying to restructure the deal through a web of European subsidiaries that would technically comply with regulations while functionally avoiding them. Lena glanced at him during a break. "You're being quiet." "Listening." "What are you hearing?" Daniel showed her his notes. Her expression went cold. When the meeting resumed, Lena let them continue for another 30 minutes. Then she set down her pen with enough force to make everyone look up. "Gentlemen, I think we need to address something directly," she said. "The subsidiary structure you're proposing through Luxembourg and Malta, that's tax avoidance dressed up as operational efficiency." The room went silent. Antonio's expression didn't change. "Ms. Voss, I'm not sure what you mean." "I mean that Mr. Hayes has been listening to your side conversations for the last 3 hours, and the deal you're building in Italian and German doesn't match the deal you're presenting in English." Several executives shifted uncomfortably. The Spanish representative went pale. Antonio looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. "You understood all of it." "All of it," Daniel confirmed. "Even the Catalan?" "Especially the Catalan." Antonio sat back, studying Daniel with the intensity of someone reassessing an opponent. Then he laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise even his own team. "Ms. Voss, your Mr. Hayes is dangerous," Antonio said. "Most negotiators hear what we want them to hear. He hears what we actually say." "That's why I brought him," Lena said calmly. "Fair enough?" Antonio switched to Italian, speaking directly to his team. Daniel caught every word as he essentially told them to abandon the subsidiary scheme and negotiate honestly because they'd been caught. Then Antonio turned back to Lena. "Let's start over. Real terms, no games. If we're going to do business with someone who can actually understand us, we might as well be honest." The renegotiation took another 6 hours. By the end, the deal was smaller, 400 million instead of 500, but clean. No hidden subsidiaries, no tax avoidance schemes, no buried compliance issues. When they finally finished, Antonio shook Daniel's hand and said in Italian, "You cost us 100 million euros today." "I saved you from regulatory investigations that would have cost twice that," Daniel replied. "True," Antonio smiled. "If you ever decide to leave Titanis, call me. We could use someone like you." "I'll keep that in mind." Back at the hotel, Lena ordered room service to her suite and invited Daniel to debrief over food he was too tired to taste. "You just restructured a $500 million deal in real time," she said. "Again. Just listen to what they were actually saying." "Stop doing that," Lena's voice was sharp. "Stop minimizing what you do. You have a skill that's worth millions to this company. Own it." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "It's hard to own something when 6 months ago I was cleaning these floors." 6 months ago you were invisible. Now you're indispensable. That's not a small change." Lena refilled her wine glass. "Hayes, I'm going to ask you something and I want an honest answer. Are you happy here?" The question caught Daniel off guard. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind that matters. You've proven yourself 10 times over. You could work anywhere. Christensen, Varelli, half a dozen other companies that have reached out asking about you. So I'm asking, is Titanus where you want to be? Daniel thought about Marcus's reassignment, about the investigation that had nearly destroyed him, about the constant need to prove he belonged in rooms where everyone else had degrees and pedigrees and traditional paths. But he also thought about Emma's new daycare, about the apartment they'd just moved into with actual bedrooms instead of a pull-out couch, about Sarah and Robert and the team that had been willing to walk away rather than watch him get railroaded. Yeah, he said finally. This is where I want to be. Even after everything? Especially after everything, because I didn't get here by accident. I fought for this. Lena nodded slowly. Good, because I have a proposal for you. She pulled out a document from her briefcase. Titanus is creating a new division, International Strategy and Linguistic Analysis. It's essentially building a team around what you do, finding overlooked talent with language skills that don't come from traditional academic paths, training them, deploying them in negotiations where cultural and linguistic context matters more than credentials. Daniel stared at the document. You want me to run it? I want you to build it. VP level position. Team of 6 to start, expanding to 12 within a year. Full authority over hiring, training, and deployment. Lena met his eyes. You'd be creating opportunities for people like you. People who learned languages from necessity instead of textbooks. Why me? Because you know exactly what they're capable of. Because you've proven that non-traditional paths can produce extraordinary results. And because, Lena paused, because watching you fight to stay here reminded me why I started this company. It wasn't to build another corporate hierarchy where only certain people get chances. It was to find the best talent regardless of where it came from. Daniel looked at the document, the salary number, the authority, the chance to build something that mattered beyond just his own success. I need to think about it, he said. Take your time. But Hayes, don't think too long. This opportunity won't wait forever. Daniel called Emma that night at 8 p.m. Rome time, which was 2 p.m. in New York. She answered on the second ring, breathless with excitement. Dad, Mrs. Chen took me to the museum. We saw dinosaurs. That sounds amazing, sweetheart. The T-Rex was huge, like so huge. Mrs. Chen said it could eat a car. Probably could. Emma chattered for 15 minutes about dinosaurs and ice cream and how Tyler at daycare finally apologized for knocking down her blocks. Then she went quiet. Dad? Yeah? I miss you, but I'm okay. Mrs. Chen is nice and we're having fun, but I still miss you. Daniel's throat tightened. I miss you too, baby. 2 more sleeps and I'll be home. Promise? Promise. After he hung up, Daniel sat in his hotel room overlooking Rome and thought about Lena's offer. VP level meant more money, more responsibility, more time away from Emma for travel and meetings, and all the demands that came with building something from nothing. But it also meant creating opportunities for people who'd been invisible, people who'd learned languages the hard way and never got chances because they didn't have the right credentials. People like he'd been 6 months ago. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Heard about the Varelli deal. You're becoming legendary. Also heard about Lena's division proposal. Please say yes. We need this. Another from Robert. Whatever Lena offered you, take it. You've earned it 10 times over. And one from Jennifer Park, the young woman who'd stopped by his office months ago. Mr. Hayes, I heard rumors about a new linguistic division. If you're building it, I want to be part of it. People like us need this. People like us. Daniel stared at those 3 words and felt something shift in his chest. He'd spent 6 months proving he belonged. 6 months fighting to keep a job where half the company thought he was unqualified. 6 months showing that credentials weren't the same as competence. But Lena wasn't asking him to keep proving himself. She was asking him to build a place where other people wouldn't have to. The flight back to New York was quieter. Daniel spent most of it drafting notes for the division, what kind of people he'd look for, how he'd structure training, which industries needed linguistic expertise beyond standard interpretation. By the time he landed, he had a rough framework for something that could actually work. Emma was waiting at the apartment with Mrs. Chen when he arrived, and she launched herself at him with the force of a small missile. You came back! I promised, didn't I? Yeah, but still. Emma hugged him tighter. I'm glad you're home. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel opened his notebook and found the page where he'd written about belonging being something you fought for. He added a new line. But maybe belonging isn't just about fighting to stay. Maybe it's about building a place where other people don't have to fight as hard. Monday morning, Daniel walked into Lena's office at 8 a.m. with a decision he'd spent the entire weekend making. "I'll do it," he said. "The division. I'll build it." Lena smiled. "Good. I've already got 4 candidates for you to interview. People with language skills from non-traditional backgrounds. One worked in refugee services and speaks Arabic, Somali, and Amharic. Another learned Mandarin and Vietnamese working restaurant jobs in California. They're all good, but they're all overlooked because they don't have degrees from the right schools." "When do I start?" "Today." Lena handed him a folder. "First interview is in an hour, conference room 3. Don't go easy on them just because they're like you. Find out if they're actually good." The first candidate was a woman named Aisha Muhammad, 28 years old, nervous but composed. She'd spent 5 years working with refugee resettlement organizations and spoke 4 languages fluently. Daniel interviewed her in Arabic first, then switched to Somali mid-conversation. She followed without missing a beat. "Why do you want to work here?" Daniel asked. "Because I'm tired of being told my experience doesn't count as qualifications," Aisha said bluntly. "I've negotiated with government officials, translated for families in crisis, and solved problems that would have destroyed people's lives if I got them wrong. But every corporate job I apply to wants certifications I don't have and degrees I couldn't afford. What makes you think you can handle business negotiations?" "I've handled life or death negotiations. Business seems easier." Daniel hired her on the spot. The second candidate was Marcus Tron, 31, who'd learned Vietnamese and Mandarin working in his family's restaurant and then taught himself Korean and Japanese from customers and online courses. He was sharp, quick, and had the same hunger Daniel recognized from looking in mirrors. "You ever work in corporate before?" Daniel asked. "No. But I've managed supply chain negotiations with distributors in 3 languages while running a restaurant that seated 200. I'm pretty sure I can handle contracts." Daniel hired him too. By the end of the week, he had 6 people, all brilliant, all overlooked, all carrying languages learned from necessity instead of classrooms. On Friday, Daniel called his first team meeting. They gathered in conference room 3, nervous and excited and completely uncertain what they'd gotten themselves into. "I'm not going to lie to you," Daniel said, looking at each of them. "This company almost fired me 3 months ago because people thought someone like me didn't belong here. They thought non-traditional backgrounds meant unqualified. They thought credentials mattered more than competence." He paused, letting that sink in. "They were wrong, and you're here to prove they were wrong. But that means you're going to be held to a higher standard. Every mistake you make, people will use as evidence that this whole division is a mistake. Every success you have, they'll attribute to luck. You're going to have to work twice as hard for half the recognition." Aisha raised her hand. "So why should we do it?" "Because someone needs to." Daniel met her eyes. "Because there are thousands of people like us who learned languages from survival and never got chances. Because corporate America keeps looking for talent in the same places and missing everyone who doesn't fit their narrow definition. And because—" He stopped, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. "Because we're better at this than people who learned from textbooks. We understand context. We hear what's not being said. And that matters." Marcus leaned forward. "What happens if we fail?" "We don't fail," Daniel said simply. "We show up, we do the work, and we prove that overlooked doesn't mean unqualified." The division's first major test came 3 weeks later. A negotiation with a Brazilian conglomerate that had been stalled for months over terms nobody could pin down. Titanis's traditional interpreters had been trying to crack it without success. Daniel brought Aisha and Marcus. The Brazilian team spoke Portuguese but kept shifting into regional dialects and business slang that the interpreters couldn't follow. Within an hour, Aisha and Marcus had identified the real issue. The Brazilians wanted environmental compliance terms that Titanis hadn't been offering because nobody understood that's what was being asked for. The deal closed in 4 hours. Word spread fast. Within a month, 3 other departments were requesting Daniel's team for their international negotiations. Within 2 months, the division expanded to 8 people. Within 3 months, Titanis was being approached by other companies asking to license their linguistic analysis model. And somewhere in all of that, Daniel stopped wondering if he belonged and started focusing on building something that mattered. 6 months after taking the VP position, Daniel stood in Lena's office for their quarterly review. The division had handled 47 negotiations, closed 39 of them, and saved Titanus an estimated $200 million in avoided compliance issues and bad deals. "You've exceeded every projection," Lena said, reviewing the numbers. "The board wants to expand the division to 15 people by next quarter. We can handle that." "I know you can." Lena closed the report. "Hayes, I want to ask you something. Do you ever regret it, taking this path instead of something simpler?" Daniel thought about that, about the investigation, the suspension, the constant pressure to prove himself, about missing bedtimes and working late, and all the ways this job had complicated his life. But he also thought about Aisha closing her first solo negotiation last week, about Marcus training 2 new hires, about Jennifer Park getting promoted to senior analyst after cracking a Japanese contract nobody else could decode. "No," he said, "I don't regret it." "Good, because I have another proposal." Daniel laughed. "Of course you do. Titanus is opening a London office. We need someone to run international operations for Europe and Asia. It's executive level, significant travel, big salary increase." Lena paused. "And it's yours if you want it." "I have a daughter," Daniel said immediately. "I know. That's why I'm asking instead of telling. If Emma's life is here, I understand. But if you're open to it, Titanus would cover relocation, international schools, full support services. You'd be building something even bigger than what you have now." Daniel looked out the window at the New York skyline, thought about Emma and her school, her friends, the stability they'd finally built. "Can I think about it?" "Take your time. But Hayes, whatever you decide, know that you've already changed this company. The division you built, it's not going anywhere. Even if you leave, it continues. That's legacy." That evening, Daniel picked Emma up from school. She was in first grade now, reading chapter books and solving math problems that made his head hurt, and took her to their favorite diner. "Dad, you look serious," Emma said, drowning her pancakes in syrup with the dedication of someone who'd perfected the ratio. "I need to talk to you about something." "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, nothing like that." Daniel took a breath. "My job offered me a new position in London." Emma's eyes went wide. "Like England, London?" "Yeah." "Would we move there?" "Only if you wanted to. This is your life too. If you want to stay here with your school and your friends, we stay." Emma was quiet, processing. Then she asked, "Would it be a good job? Important? Really important? Would you be happy?" The question gutted him. "I'd miss New York, but yeah, I think I'd be happy." Emma thought about this seriously, her small face scrunched in concentration. "Can I think about it?" "Of course." They finished dinner and walked home through streets that had become familiar. Emma held his hand and talked about school and how her teacher said she was good at reading. And Daniel realized that whatever they decided, they'd be okay. Because the thing about belonging wasn't just fighting to stay in one place, it was knowing you had the skills to build a life anywhere. A week later, Emma came to him with a notebook that looked suspiciously like his. She'd written a list in careful first-grade handwriting. Good things about London. New adventure. Dad's important job. Different accent. They have cool castles. Good things about New York. My school, Mrs. Chen, my friends, our apartment. At the bottom, she'd written, "Both places are good. I pick adventure." Daniel stared at his 6-year-old daughter's handwriting and felt his eyes burn. "You sure?" he asked. "Dad, you taught me that trying new things is brave. Moving to London is trying something new." Emma looked up at him with absolute certainty. "We'll be brave together." 3 months later, Daniel stood in a London office overlooking the Thames while Emma started at an international school where she'd already made 2 friends and declared British accents weird but cool. His team in New York was thriving under Aisha's leadership. The London division was just getting started, 4 new hires, all with non-traditional backgrounds, all brilliant and hungry and ready to prove themselves. Lena had flown in for the office opening, and she stood beside Daniel watching the city lights come on as evening fell. "Any regrets?" she asked. Ask me in 6 months. Fair, Lena smiled. You know what the board said when I told them you were moving to London? They said you were the best hire they'd ever fought against. I'm not sure that's a compliment. It's the highest compliment they know how to give. Lena turned to face him. Hayes, you went from invisible to indispensable in less than a year. You built a division that's changing how this company thinks about talent, and now you're doing it again in a different country. That's not luck. I know, Daniel said, and for the first time, he actually believed it. That night, after Emma was asleep in their new apartment that still smelled like paint and fresh starts, Daniel opened his notebook and turned to a fresh page. He thought about writing something profound, some great insight about journeys and belonging and proving yourself. Instead, he wrote, started as a janitor who heard languages nobody else could understand, became someone who builds places for people like me. Emma's asleep in the next room. Mrs. Chen sent a care package that arrived today. The team in New York closed another major deal. London is cold, but the work is good. Tomorrow I teach 4 new hires that credentials aren't the same as competence. That overlooked doesn't mean unqualified. That languages learned from necessity can build careers that matter. Marcus was wrong. The board was wrong. Everyone who thought people like me don't belong at executive tables was wrong. Not because I'm perfect, not because the path was easy, but because I showed up. I did the work, and I refused to disappear. That's enough. Daniel closed the notebook and looked at the stack of language books on his desk. He'd started learning Farsi last month, just because he could. Because the thing about languages was that there was always another one to learn, always another way to understand what people were actually saying beneath what they wanted heard. And somewhere out there, in some other building, in some other city, there was probably another person cleaning floors who spoke languages nobody else recognized. Another person who was invisible but shouldn't be. Another person who just needed someone to notice that overlooked didn't mean unqualified. Daniel couldn't help all of them, but he could help some. And that, he thought, was worth every fight he'd ever had to wage. The next morning, Emma asked if they could explore London on Saturday. Where do you want to go? Daniel asked. The tower with the jewels, and maybe a castle, and definitely someplace with good pancakes. That's a long list. We have time, Emma said confidently. We live here now. And just like that, London wasn't new anymore. It was home. Daniel went to work that morning and taught his first London training session. 4 people with languages learned from necessity. Arabic from refugee camps, Punjabi from family restaurants, Polish from construction sites, Yoruba from community organizing. All of them brilliant, all of them overlooked, all of them ready. You're here because you have skills that matter, Daniel told them. Not because you have degrees from the right schools or certifications from the right programs. You're here because you understand something most people miss, that language isn't just words. It's context, culture, the 1,000 ways people hide meaning in plain sight. He looked at each of them, seeing himself 6 months ago, a year ago, 7 years ago, when he'd been drifting through countries learning languages from survival. The world is going to tell you that you don't belong here, Daniel continued, that people without traditional paths can't succeed at this level. Prove them wrong. Not by being perfect, not by never making mistakes, but by showing up, by doing work that matters, by refusing to be invisible. Aisha spoke up from the back of the room. She'd flown in to help with the London launch. And by building something for the people who come after us. Daniel nodded. That too. After the training session ended, Daniel stood in his London office and looked out at a city he was still learning to navigate. His phone buzzed with messages. Emma's school confirming pickup times. Lena approving budget expansions. Sarah sending updates from New York. Marcus asking about hiring protocols for the next round. Normal work. Important work. Work that mattered. 6 months ago, he'd been standing in a New York lobby wondering if he'd just destroyed his life by declining severance. Now he was building something that would outlast him. That evening, Daniel picked Emma up from school, and they explored London like tourists, the Tower, the bridges, a pancake place that Emma declared almost as good as home. Dad, Emma said as they walked along the Thames in the fading light, are you happy here? Daniel thought about that, about the work ahead, the challenges waiting, the constant pressure to prove that non-traditional paths could build traditional success. But he also thought about the 4 people he'd hired today, about the division thriving in New York, about Emma beside him, brave enough to choose adventure. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said. "I'm happy here." "Good." Emma squeezed his hand. "Me too." And in that moment, watching his daughter navigate a new city with the confidence of someone who'd learned that belonging wasn't about fitting in, it was about being brave enough to build your own place, Daniel finally understood what he'd been fighting for all along. Not just a job, not just survival, not just proving he belonged, but creating a world where people like him didn't have to fight so hard to be seen, where languages learned from necessity weren't dismissed as inadequate, where invisible people got chances to become indispensable. That was the real work. And Daniel Hayes, former janitor, current VP of International Operations, father to the bravest 6-year-old he'd ever met, was just getting started. Because the thing about being overlooked was that it taught you to see other people who were being missed. And once you saw them, you couldn't unsee them. You couldn't walk past them. You couldn't let them stay invisible. You had to build something better. And that's exactly what Daniel intended to do. One language at a time, one overlooked person at a time, one negotiation at a time. Until the day when kids like Emma grew up in a world where your path mattered less than your work, where credentials were just one way to prove competence, not the only way, where janitors who understood 9 languages could walk through glass doors and sit at tables where billion-dollar decisions got made, not because they got lucky, but because someone finally noticed they'd been there all along, just waiting for a chance to show what they could do.